Sorry, is that accepted?
Okay, I'm going to call this meeting to order. Sorry for being late. We had a chair emergency. So,
Sorry, is that accepted?
if I could ask tonight, okay, I'm going to, you offer the invocation, and Jennifer, would you lead us in the pledge in that order?
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are thankful to meet together this evening and discuss the matters of the city and our citizens. We pray for a permeating spirit of calm to be here with us this evening and for us to discuss these issues reasonably and trying to see all sides of the issues. And we're thankful for this wonderful city that we are blessed to live in and be a part of. And we're thankful for all those who work so hard on our behalf to make it such a wonderful place to be. We pray for the leaders of our nation, for the leaders of this state, especially as they're in legislative sessions that impact us so greatly. And we pray that they will have cool heads and understand the needs of the people that they serve as well, and that they can do things in order to facilitate growth and progress in the best ways. We thank thee again for the opportunity to be here this evening and pray for the evening's discussions to go well. We say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Please stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I take a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Appears that it passed unanimously. Our first item on the agenda is public comment, and we want to get to everybody, but I have to clarify a couple of things. If you bring up something that has not been advertised, we can't talk about it, so we're not going to answer questions that are proposed because it has to be noticed to the public. That's the way the law works. So if you have a comment that is on a public hearing, which we have a couple tonight, those public hearings will be called for separately, and that would be the appropriate time if you see it on the agenda as a public hearing. So those are the options. If got a couple of comments.
And the councilman sneezed.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's not.
We have a couple of comments that came in via email before this meeting, and I'd have the recorder read those into the record to begin with.
Okay, this first email is from Mark Wagner. He says, I have lived in Syracuse since 1995. At that time, Syracuse had massive growth, and that growth has continued to this day and has recently accelerated. The city is faced with the cost that comes with this growth, which is also compounded by inflation. As a citizen, I feel that the city has done a good job responding to that growth up to this point in time. However, the surge in growth that will come with North Davis Corridor and expansion of Antelope Drive, the addition of 193, and multiple construction projects underway and planned, the cost of the growth must be addressed. The city has lost resources and will continue to lose resources to other city and county agencies. This is happening at a very bad time. The Syracuse Police Department is already short-staffed, and the city growth will only compound the problem. Syracuse PD is bonded, which means they are very highly qualified and costly to replace. I do hope the city is able to recruit additional police officers to maintain the level of safety in Syracuse. The Syracuse Police Department is too costly to rebuild. Due to multiple concerns raised on social media, the fact that the Syracuse Police Department is shorthanded is known by those that would take advantage of that situation. This must be addressed as soon as possible. The surge in property values will certainly result in increased tax revenue. I recommend that Syracuse City maintain the level of support it has and provide a competitive wage to all city employees. That will certainly mean an increase in property and sales tax. I do hope that there is a graduated tax increase to lessen the impact to the residents. Okay, the second email is from Shay League. She says, I am currently a Syracuse City employee. The resolution before you is to bring wages citywide up to the 60th percentile of comparative cities. To be clear, that means that out of 10 Syracuse-sized cities, 4 of them will still pay better than Syracuse. In many cases, Syracuse is currently paying far less than comparable cities, and this is a request to do better. An employee faced with better pay at nearby cities has 2 options. 1, to take their experience elsewhere. 2, to unionize and bargain collectively. I chose option 1, to move cities, and this Friday, February 11th, 2022 is my last day. I am making a lateral transfer to Fernley, Nevada because they offered me a $3 per hour raise in a lower cost of living area. I am willing to move an entire state away for a 5.5% raise. Though most employees would not be willing to make such a dramatic change, consider that the last 3 hires in my department alone were of talented professionals lured away from nearby cities. Many of us wouldn't go so far as to move to Nevada, but people will consider driving to West Point, Layton, Clearfield, or another of the many neighboring municipalities. Remember that employees do not have to wait for job openings to know who is paying better. They only have to visit transparent.utah.gov to know where they might be better compensated for their time and expertise. Were I to stay, joining with the local 1004 would be an attractive option. Utah's branch of the AFS-CME trade union has been established in the Wasatch Front since 1976. It has yet to make inroads here only because Syracuse City has historically compensated people fairly. This year alone, every employee in Syracuse has taken roughly a 7% hit to purchasing power due to a combination of historic inflation in the area and Syracuse's policy of not tying wages to inflation. If council were to then decide that matching or exceeding 60% of neighboring municipalities is too much to ask, the option for unionization would suddenly become very attractive. My intent is not to threaten, as I have nothing to gain. I am writing a comment instead of appearing in person because I am busy packing to move to a different city that has made employee compensation a priority. I am writing because Syracuse City is an excellent organization, and this is due primarily to the caliber of employees you have attracted in the past. If you would like those excellent employees to continue to excel at Syracuse, I strongly recommend passing resolution R2208 to include option A for everyone. Okay, this final one is from Sue Wagner. As a resident and a citizen of Syracuse, I have big concerns with the loss of so many of our veteran police officers. We are going to be a city staffed with rookie officers with a new freeway going through our town. I don't think the majority of our community has a clue about the crisis that is brewing in our city. Some of my talking points are the response time to urgent calls has been 2 to 4 minutes on average, depending on time of day. That time frame is really good considering other large cities, Salt Lake and West Valley, have calls pending for hours sometimes. The citizens of Syracuse have been spoiled with a PD and fire department that can respond quickly. That all changes as staffing diminishes to the point that a domestic now has to pen for 30 to 60 minutes because no one is available. The multi-vehicle car crash that has injuries has to wait because everyone is tied up on calls or no one is in the area. We have all been lucky to live in a pretty safe city where people don't lock their cars at night and forget to put their garage door down. If there isn't staff on a graveyard shift to be proactive and patrol neighborhoods at night, property crimes will skyrocket. If it's not bolted to the floor, it will get stolen. If the city thinks the sheriff's office will pick up the slack, they are horribly mistaken. They also have staffing issues of their own and have other cities to patrol. This would diminish response time and manpower. Other surrounding agencies, Clinton, Clearfield, and Layton, are busy too and can't always help. When the police department is understaffed, guess who reaps the reward of that? Criminals. They often know how many cops on duty and when shift changes occur. If you think they don't, you are mistaken. Crime isn't going away in a growing city, so it's the council and mayor's job to address staffing to keep crime in check, to keep and pay to have the best and most experienced officers available. I've heard some elected officials say that we're having this crisis because there isn't enough commercial sales tax from business, so they have to rely on property tax. Well, guess whose fault that is? You guessed it, the city leadership. So they may have to do a temporary tax increase to fix the issue until commercial tax kicks in. There are too many people in the city who will do anything to keep Syracuse a sleepy farm town. I like that idea, but obviously it's just a dream. The city is growing rapidly. We're currently around 33,000 residents. What will that increase be by the end of 2022? I'm guessing around 40,000. The city will have a population of around 60 to 65,000 by the time it's done being developed. Just imagine the issues that we could be faced with if they don't do something. A growing city with a new highway running through the middle and no police to control it. Wow. One of the main issues with the mayor and city council's mentality is that they are reactionary and not proactive. They only respond when something hits crisis. They have known for quite a while now that the freeway would be built through the middle of the city. More people, more cars, more everything. So now here we are in 2022. The freeway is well under construction and roughly a year and some change away from being finished. And what has been done? Nothing. So the final thing I want to bring up, the truth is that we can't fill the vacant officer positions quickly enough to plug the holes in the department. They don't pay well enough to entice lateral candidates to apply here. The last 4 officers that have been hired, except one, were all brand new officers that hadn't been through the academy and had no prior experience. It takes around 4 to 5 months for these officers to complete the academy and graduate. If they make it out of the academy, then they have a FTO process that takes anywhere from 2 to 4 months, depending on how they perform. So they are looking at around 9 months for a new hire to get up and going on their own. How many thousands of dollars has the city been hemorrhaging when new officers get hired here, stay for a year or two, then leave somewhere else as a lateral candidate for higher wages? This place has been a training ground or stepping stone for years because of low wages and total compensation. If the city had higher wages, we could recruit laterals from other agencies to come here when there is a vacancy. They typically have a very short FTO process, and obviously we do not need to go through the academy. So they can be up patrolling and on their own within 4 to 3 weeks, maybe less. Please do something productive instead of just talking about it, blaming others, etc. Help our remaining officers stay safe, and let's keep them.
Okay. I'm going to ask that we put up a clock. We allow for 3 minutes for public comment. And because we have so many people here tonight, I'm going to have to try to hold to that so that we can get to everybody and still do the business that's on our calendar tonight. So if you'd like to make a public comment, come forward. You have 3 minutes to address the council. Oh yeah, state your name and address when you come forward.
Catherine Sutton, 3059 South, 1265 West. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. My husband and I greatly support our police department, and we have noticed the rise in crime and some unfortunate things happening in our own neighborhood, which is often left to citizens to address on their own, mostly because they're teenagers who are bored. There are a lot of pressures on us as individuals and also on the city that are outside of our control, nationwide and county. We have seen the property value on our house skyrocket. We've also seen our household income decline by 2/3 this year. It is very hard to absorb an extra $100,000 of valuation on our property taxes, along with inflation and many other things. That being said, it is a priority to keep our city safe, and we do need our police and our emergency workers. My husband and I do support a modest increase in property tax, but we would ask the city council to consider being very conservative in how we approach this and evaluate all options. Where in our budget can we find other sources of income? Are there things that we can cut out? How can we graduate this to not impact people as severely? We have many people in our own neighborhood who are on fixed incomes, and this will hurt them a lot. For some people, $600 extra a year may not be much. For others, it is a lot. So we would ask you to be thoughtful in considering this on both sides, because we do support our police, we do support our city. We know we have to have that infrastructure, but we would ask you to just take a moderate approach and see what we can do to protect our police and emergency workers immediately. Maybe cap that increase to $250, and then evaluate during the truth and taxation session in August, so we have a better idea. And as citizens, we can educate ourselves better between now and then. Thank you.
Good evening. Appreciate the opportunity to address the council. Mayor. Pardon me?
Name and address, please.
Yes, my name is Dave Pollard. We live at 1450 South, 2200 West. Okay. First of all, I'd like to say that I have a sincere and vest in the city. my family. In fact, my wife's grandparents were one of the founders of Syracuse years ago. My wife's lived here, born, raised here in Syracuse. I have a sincere interest in law enforcement. I've been in law enforcement for 40 plus years, still active in law enforcement. I started here in Syracuse in 1980 with a 4-man department. So our roots go pretty deep. I have been on the other side of the coin where we haven't had officers when needed. When we've been on the road and we'd have some kind of a situation where it would tie us up and another call would come in, very important, and we wouldn't be able to respond. The problem we're having now is if you think that other agencies are going to drop what they're doing to come into this city and help one of our officers, you're sadly mistaken. They're busy. They have their own responsibilities. Anyway, if you look at statistics with these wages, if you look at the history, the last few years, the Highway Patrol, for one, found that a family of 4 with the wages that they were getting at the time was poverty. They could qualify for food stamps at the time. The governor saw that. The situation was rectified and things were taken care of. Salt Lake City, a few years ago had the same problem with response times. Response times in the city were anywhere from half hour to 45 minutes.
I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
Yes, sir.
Time.
What I'm trying to say is we need to have our officers. We cannot continue to hemorrhage our officers out of this city. We need to have them here. It takes too long, as was quoted, it takes too long to get a rookie officer up and running. We need to make these wages for our officers, this department, comparable so that it can be looked at from other agencies, other officers, and bring in experienced officers into our city.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else at this time?
Hello, I'm Mason Flint. I live at 3075 West, 975 South. I'm a transplant to Syracuse City. I've been there about 3 years. I come to you guys as a disappointed citizen. I'm not happy with what you guys have represented, what you guys are putting into your employees. I once worked for Syracuse Police Department about 11 years ago. Myself, like many of your other officers, no longer work for Syracuse. It's a disappointment of what you guys are doing. The pay wages, I don't need to sit here and tell you wages because I believe that you already know them. And I believe that these fine gentlemen have provided you with that. Syracuse is known for falling behind in wages. And what do? They throw a Band-Aid at it. It's time to fix these wages. I still work in law enforcement and I once applied to come back here to Syracuse. When I saw my starting wage and what I was going to be at, I couldn't even consider it. I couldn't raise my family at that. Councilmember Teague, you have 2 brothers who are in law enforcement. 3, do me a favor, call any one of them, ask them if they would come work for Syracuse at that wage. I know they wouldn't. Talk to them. I can look right here on the front row. I don't know any of these people because they're all newer officers. I've seen 5 officers leave in the past 6 months to outside agencies. Why is that happening? A lot of it is because of wages. A lot of those are my friends. They're in other agencies making far better money than what you guys are willing to pay them. I'm not only going to speak to that. Well, I will say, I don't know what the guys at the top of the scale, what they're making. I'll leave that up to you guys to evaluate to see who you think does deserve those wages. If it's all around, I hope that's what you guys can do. You have other city employees. I hope that you carefully look at that and consider them when it does come down to wages. It's a training ground here. People come here, and I would be curious of the life expectancy of how long they're staying here, because I don't think it is very long. Outside agency love you guys because they know that they can come here, train their guys, and that we can get somebody who's trained, pay him more money, and then we're going to get a great officer out of it. In my eyes, that's not the right way to conduct business. So, I mean, we can bond a $28 million park, but we can't pay these guys what they're worth. So that's a lot of what I have to speak to. I hope that you guys carefully look at this, decide what it is needs to be done, and that you guys make this the right situation. Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I'm Sean McKinnon, live over on Mulberry Way. I just like to speak real quick about our law enforcement agency here in Syracuse. They're good people. I appreciate them. They're not getting paid what they deserve. As a taxpayer here in Syracuse, I'd be more than happy to pay more taxes in order to pay them what they deserve. Keep them here in Syracuse City. You know, it wasn't too long ago, I had a maniac driving a stolen vehicle on Mulberry Way in front of my house that these guys were able to apprehend. I'm grateful for their service. I'm glad they were there. Got an 8-year-old daughter, and you know, I don't know what this person's intent was, but I can tell you that I'm just glad that these men and women were there to keep us safe that day. And that's only one example. I love living in Syracuse. I feel safe living in Syracuse. And it's because we do have a great police department. And I'd like to keep it that way by increasing their wage, giving them better benefits, and you know, making it worthwhile for them to come to work and at least, you know, go home to their families, you know, with a decent paycheck when they've got to wear a bulletproof vest to come to work. And so I would support and encourage you all to highly consider increasing their wage. Thank you.
My name is Devin Rich, live at 3536 West 910 South. For those that haven't done their homework on law enforcement, I'll give the latest statistics that I can for some surrounding agencies. Last I knew, just this end of last year, Syracuse bumped up their starting pay at $21.18 an hour. Kaysville starts at $24.07, Farmington $25.04, Clearfield $26, Layton $24.44, Woods Cross $26.05. Davis County, $23.99, North Salt Lake, $27.60, and Centerville, $27.60. As an officer myself, I have no idea why anybody would apply to work for the Syracuse Police Department at those wages when you have agencies so close nearby that you could make such a drastic increase in wages to help support your family, help support being able to live in greater communities. I appreciate being able to live here in Syracuse due to the benefit that I received from another agency. I don't know how they could even live within this community on the wages that they receive. I understand a lot more goes into it than just a starting wage, but just here to speak in my support of doing what we can to be able to keep officers here that have that training experience. So we don't have an officer that we train for 2 or 3 years here at Syracuse and invest money and time into just so that they can go to another agency. I do know often other agencies are asked to come into Syracuse to help cover calls. It concerns me when you have a small amount of officers left in Syracuse that are trying to handle calls that their backup may not be close by, and may not be able to respond to somebody's house as quickly due to being tied up on a call that they can't leave from. And that citizen of Syracuse is then waiting for Clinton Police Department to show up if they're available. Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Eric Kibker. I live at 3505 South Noble Pine Drive. I hope my comments don't come off in any way critical or disparaging of the police department, because I certainly don't feel that way. I don't know how somebody could afford a house in our city on those kinds of wages. I do want to point out, go back to what was mentioned about the park bond. When that was put forward, you, Mr. Mayor, wrote a letter that I believe was pretty convincing to a lot of people, saying that there was alternative sources of means of ways to trying to find funding for that besides raising property taxes. And I believe in part, that was probably one of the reasons why you were elected as mayor, was because the citizens of the city didn't want their property tax increased. So I hope that that same consideration is coming into effect here, where as we are looking at increasing the wages of the police officers, which they are deserving of, that we are looking at multiple ways of funding that, multiple different tax revenues besides just a tax on the citizens and the property. You know, I remember seeing not too very long ago that there was a posting for a job posting for Syracuse City for somebody to run a scoreboard for Parks and Recreations. I'm wondering, do we need to be hiring somebody to run a scoreboard if we can't pay our officers better? So just hope that those other things are taken into consideration besides just a straight property tax on the citizens to provide that salary increase. So thank you.
Tyson Wakefield. I live at 1831 West, 775 South. I'm a little out of my comfort zone, but wanted to come up here and talk. I worked at Syracuse for about 4 years. Unfortunately, I had to leave. They just didn't pay very well. I had to leave to a different agency, like everyone else has said. That's what happens in Syracuse. A lot of people stay here for a couple of years, they leave. Syracuse has been a training ground for years. In the last 5 or 6 months, we've had 4 officers leave. I know there's a couple more that are talking about leaving. If they do, they're going to be down, 6, 7 people. That's about half the department. I don't think they're going to be able to have a department at that point. Davis County is great, don't get me wrong, but if you look at the response times in Davis County, a lot of those deputies are in other cities. It takes a long time to get to West Point. A lot of people talk about response times of calls. One thing Syracuse has done very well on when I first started was the proactivity. Now, if you're down that many officers, you can't be proactive. That's one thing that Syracuse has done well. They forced out a lot of drug houses when I first started. And, you know, if we outsource the police department or we don't have a police department or we're running down to solo coverage or all that, we can't be proactive. We have to stay busy, or we have to stay clear for the calls that come in. Proactivity is very important. And I am a citizen of Syracuse as well. I don't want my taxes raised, but at the same time, you got to think what's more important, raising taxes or having a police department. I think raising the taxes, I'm willing to do that for higher wages for the police department. I don't want to see everyone else leave. Syracuse does a good job with training officers, and unfortunately, like I said, they leave. And when you have a new guy come in, if they have to go to the academy, that's about 3 months. They do FTO, that's another 3 months. So by the time when he first starts, they're not on the road by themselves for about 7 months. The department I went to, it was a brand new police department. They hired 65 laterals. Syracuse hasn't had a lateral, or they've had 3 laterals in the last 9 years. And why is that? Like they said, nobody wants to take that pay cut to come to Syracuse. I'm not expecting Syracuse to be competitive with like West Valley, Taylorsville, Salt Lake, but they should be comparable to Clearfield, Layton, Clinton, all that. Losing an officer to the Valley, yeah, that's rough, but it's understandable. But if you start losing officers to neighboring agencies, you don't want that. And that's what's going to happen. Thank you.
My name is Brett Kitchen, 3640 South Lakeview Way. I actually have a couple of questions because I'm kind of new to this whole thing. I'm curious, and I don't know who to direct these to, but
To be clear, we can't answer questions during public comment
okay.
because by law, we have to have things announced in advance for the public. So that means that if you ask a question here, unless it's really basic, like something we can just direct you to, we'd have to do it at a future meeting when we announce we're going to have that discussion.
Okay. Well, then I guess I'll just kind of say my piece. My experience with this kind of thing is limited, but there's something principle called Parkinson's law out there, and basically it states that whatever resources are allocated to a task or a project, they will expand to use whatever those resources are, and I see that happen a lot in government. And so while obviously we need police officers, they need to be paid enough to be fair, or to be more than fair, so that we can keep our community safe. I don't think anybody's disputing that. The concern, I think, for the average citizen is, where does it stop? If we increase our taxes for this and that and the next thing, I mean, at what point is it just too much? And so I think that as we consider this, it seems to me that there are some options that would be available besides just raising taxes as the answer to every problem government has. And that's my concern with this being the solution for everything that comes up. So 100% support figuring out a way to pay our officers. I also 100% support being creative and finding the funds so that it doesn't just continue to be just raise taxes. That's the answer to every problem in government. Thanks.
And I will state that we'll talk more about this subject, and hopefully your questions will be answered at that time. Anyone else?
Evening, Council. Josh Romney, 2877 West, 2495 South. You have a very difficult decision to make on your behalf and our behalf. And if I was in your shoes, I'm not exactly entirely sure what I would even do. I am a former city employee. I think the gentleman before me said it very well, and I kind of probably echo him just a little bit, but I find myself at a crossroad. I certainly support increasing raises for, our police officers and firefighters and other city members. But at the same time, as a citizen, raising taxes is difficult. All right, the cost of living is already extremely high, and each year we raise our taxes, and it becomes even more difficult to sustain a life here. So I certainly can go either direction. So I think the only thing that I ask is that you carefully consider the raise of taxes and potentially look for other areas and ways to find that money to increase wages for our police officers and our firefighters. I just think that could be potentially a better option than raising taxes. Thank you for your time.
Doug Lund. I live at 2023 Jackson Lane in Syracuse. And just a couple quick things. In me doing a little bit of research, which isn't that great, but a little bit, Clearfield has the highest property tax rate of 0.0025, I believe is what it is. Our tax rate is 0.00169. We're right in the middle of the pack as far as 15 cities here. Farmington's is 0.00149. Now, why is Farmington's lower than ours? Well, because they got a station park, because they got some of these other things that are going in, because they've done some planning and preparing so that they get revenue from other people. We're going down to Station Park all the time to do things, you know, or whatever, for their concerts or for their ice skating or for whatever it is. When I was going around talking to different businesses here, they thought the apartments over here, because of our multi-use thing, that was going to be a station park, that's what it was going to be. And yet we got taken advantage of over there by how we did that with our multi-use and what we did. So I think if we do a little better planning and a little better preparation, that we can do it. I'm all for taking care of police officers, and I know that we need 30 of them. And right now we got 23 and 2 just left. 3 of them aren't going to be around. We're at 20. I mean, I know we need tons of firefighters, but how do we take care of that and how do we plan? That's what we got to be looking at. We got to be bringing in more businesses. We got to be getting other people's money into our city so that it's not just the citizens here that are taking the brunt. We got to quit doing the crisis management and the reactive. We got to be proactive. I don't care, in all honesty, what decision comes from the city council. I'm okay. Okay, let's raise our taxes up to 0.00199. We'll be third. Okay, then we can get that 60% or 70% or wherever we want to be to pay our employees or whatever by smart planning. But if we take into account the 20% increase of all of the houses and townhomes that are already approved that are coming in. So again, I don't care what we do or whatever, but what I hope comes from this is if we decide to raise taxes, all of us, that the vote's 5-0. If we decide to table it and think about it and figure out what's going on, that the vote's 5-0. If we decide to not do anything at all, that the vote's 5-0. Because the city council needs to get the trust of the citizens in Syracuse back and know that we're all one and it's we, not me. Thanks.
Hello, my name is Shane Croton. I live at 2353 South, 3585 West. I would agree with many of the people here tonight that you do need to be competitive with other municipalities around you, because that's the only way you're going to stop the bleeding. But I would also say at the same time, I know most of the discussion has been about police, but I've also heard talk about all of the city employees. Couple of things I'd say on that. I would agree with the last gentleman that if you want to find resources, you got to look at sales tax revenues. That's the key, which means you have to bring in business. And that way you're going to lighten the burden on the residents at the same time. But as far as salaries overall, I'd say don't be afraid to compress wages. The problem's not at the top. People making 6 figures, they don't have an issue. It's the people at the bottom, the entry level stuff that you're competing with fast food joints now and other things, you know, outside of municipalities. So those are things you got to take into account. So I'd recommend that if you look at doing stuff like that, don't budge on the upper levels. Just look at the lower levels, because that's where you have the problem. And I'd also say be exhaustive with your research. Don't just, you know, come up with some haphazard numbers. Look at cities that are comparable in size, comparable in locality, because that's going to give you the best research. But I agree with many others too, that, I don't want all the burden placed on us as citizens. You got to look at that sales tax base, because that's going to help you get those salaries to where they need to be to keep employees and officers here. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name's Zach. I am an employee down at Public Works. I'm not taking nothing away from the cops, City Hall, parks, nobody. But we all need raises across the board. From, growth, everything going on. Public Works entry-level jobs are down in the $15 an hour, when we can go to Del Taco and make $20 an hour working a night shift. That's just kind of wrong. You can go anywhere else and get more money, but it has to be a whole. We're not just favoring one person. We're not favoring a department. It has to be a whole. And being up here, it's kind of nerve-wracking because I might get retaliation from other people, but it has to be a whole. I've been here 9 years and haven't really got a raise, but I'm here because I like the people I work with. I'm here because I like the job I have. I like supporting the Syracuse citizens. And I think Public Works gets overlooked more times than not. We snowplow the water, sewer, streets, sidewalks, gutters, storm drains. All of that, without any of us down there, this whole city would stop. Just like the police department, they need more people. They need more funding so that the criminals stay out, so that it's a safer spot for our citizens. Same with the fire department, with all the paramedics that we need to come in now due to the Davis County sheriffs pulling out. They need more help. We all need more help in a general consensus. And in 9 years, I can say in the streets department, we got one full-time person, but look at all the expansion going on. We're being stretched so thin that we're not maintaining what we have. We're putting out fires here and there, but we're not maintaining or preventing anything from happening, from Public Works to City Hall to parks to everybody in a whole. We're not, we need to do something that's proactive, but it has to be for a whole. It's a whole city problem. It's not just one department problem. And that's all I got to say about it. So,
Zach, for the record, can you state your address? Sorry, we have to get that on record.
No, I live over in Clinton at 1602 North, 725 West. And I do know a lot of other people live over there. And there are other jobs that are around surrounding cities. Even construction companies we can go to and get a higher wage.
Yeah, it's fine. We just need to have everything. Okay, seeing no further comment, I will close public comment. Next item on our agenda is, we have an item of common consent. In our last work session, we had an extensive discussion on council assignments, and that's what this common consent item is. It's published for those who want to see that. I'll take a motion on that.
So can I ask a question on that first? So
if you, yes, but
pull it
we'll
off, I
pull it
guess.
off.
Yeah, if we could just pull it off for just a
Okay,
sec.
so we will pull that off, common consent, and open it up for discussion.
Yeah, so are these I'm just looking through the packet. I want to make sure I'm in the right spot. This is the special services district and all.
No, this
Okay.
is,
It's just,
this is just the,
just our assignments.
yes.
Okay, I put it back on. Common consent.
Why don't you do that with a motion?
Yeah. I move that we move it back to common consent and approve.
Okay.
Is that fair to?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes by common consent.
Sorry, that was.
That's okay. That's okay. So our next item is we have public hearing items for special service districts. We have two. I'll take these as one motion, but we will discuss them separately. The first item is proposed resolution R 22-04, appointing Council Member Carver to the Davis County Mosquito Abatement District. The second item is proposed resolution 2205, appointing Council Member Savage to the Administrative Control Board of the Wasatch Integrated Waste Management District. We'll take the first one for discussion. No, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, I'm trying to think if the public hearing comes first. Yes, so the public hearing, I will open this first to public hearing. With no one coming forward, I'll close the public hearing and open it up for council discussion.
I'll lead off if that's okay.
Go ahead.
I had jumped the gun earlier. So the only question I had was just around the language, why the difference in a date for Jordan to finish his and just a term for Jennifer on the mosquito abatement. I just didn't know if there's a nuance that.
Yeah, that comes from the districts or the organization. They all have their own way of going about that. And yeah, one says you have a term, another one says you have an expiration date.
So it's not something that was.
It's not something we created.
Okay. Then I have no concerns. I don't care, as far as them being assigned, I think we agree that those were where we wanted to go. I just was wondering about that.
Any discussion on Mr. Savage or the other item? Okay, so I would take a motion for both appointments.
I move that we approve resolution R 2204 and R 2205, appointing Councilmember Carver and Councilmember Savage to their respective boards.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay, now we will come to the item that I know that a lot of people are here for, and it is a public hearing, but we are first going to bring up some information and clarify the issue that we'll be discussing here today. This is represented as resolution R 22-08, adjusting city budget for the fiscal year. Primarily, this came forward as an item because we recognize the crisis of wages in the police department. We also explored where we are collectively, so that has exposed more to this issue than just the fact that we are struggling to keep people in the police department. But I would remind council that originally this was scheduled to be an item for that department, and that we traditionally deal with this issue at the Truth and Taxation hearing that would happen in August of this year. So I'm going to ask Brody to describe the situation. He's got some slides, and then we'll open it up for public hearing. But this way, hopefully, we'll answer some of your questions before that. Okay.
Okay, good evening, everybody, and everybody at home. Thank you for coming out. We're glad you made it. We're glad you got the message. We sent out an advertisement that included a possibility of a tax increase, and like the mayor said, I'll go through what it is exactly is going on tonight, so that we all have a common understanding. I'm sure you've read things online, maybe you've talked to your neighbor. And so we want to just make sure that we're all here and we all understand what is actually on the table. Since we're talking about finances, I want to start off. All of our city budget, where the money goes and everything is on the website. This certificate of achievement of excellence the city has received 11 years straight. It is a national standard certificate that has to be earned. And what it says is that the city puts forth the financial picture and the financial story of the city in an open and transparent manner. And Steve Marshall, our administrative services director here, he does the heavy lifting on that. And we're proud of that. So tonight's issues with this hearing, as you all are well aware, is regarding staffing and wages. We're dedicated to letting you know about this. So the decisions, they aren't going to constitute an immediate tax increase tonight. So if the council takes a vote to raise wages, that does not mean an immediate tax increase tonight. Okay. What that means, as the mayor said, is it will likely obligate the city to consider a tax increase in August, because that's when by law we do a tax increase decision, either yes or no, once a year, and that's in August. The quantities that we're talking about in this issue are so large that it would likely obligate the council to do a tax increase of some sort. Now, some of that could be offset by savings in other places. It could be offset, if they want to use, if there's some sales tax available. So that there's other variables at play, but the quantities are so large when you talk about getting wages to where they need to be in the city, which we'll talk about here in a second, that it will likely require them to consider a tax increase. So I'd like everybody to just kind of understand what the city's policy is on where we pay employees. We have kind of a free market ethic, if you will, that we aim to pay our employees what the market is willing to pay that employee. And we set it at the 60th percentile. And what our policy says is that every 4 years, we will reset those wages to make sure they're at the 60th percentile. And as was mentioned before, that means out of 10 cities, 4 of them, we would be in the top 4. Why do we do that? Well, we don't set it as the top paying city because that's really not needed to have the top employees. All of us, whether we work for the city or not, and you probably included, most people don't just take a job strictly for the money. They want a place that they want to go to work and they enjoy going to work. And we try to create an environment like that here at the city. But we do need to pay competitive wages. And we've decided, we meaning the city and the city council specifically, have decided that the 60th percentile is where we have been agreed upon that that's a good market rate. We do that to ensure that the citizens get the best service possible. You have to have good employees to get good service. Municipal government is largely a service industry, and it requires people to serve people. And so we aim to try to get the best people we can. So what's been going on? Well, as you know, wages have been going up. The market is paying higher wages, specifically over the last 2 years. It's really started to skyrocket. So as I mentioned, our policy is on a 4-year cycle, which back when that policy was originally adopted, it was a stable environment. That was in 2016. And 4 years seemed appropriate. Anymore, 4 years seems way too long for people to wait. We'll fall further and further behind. So we have positions in the city that are falling below the 60th percentile, as much as 30% off. And some of those are even with it. Last December, 2 months ago, the council approved a 10% increase for police and fire. And for police specifically, that we're already down in like the 30th percentile because other cities are doing mid-year adjustments like this. Okay. So what the council has already considered in a previous meeting, I'm sorry if you can't read this, I'll I'll kind of summarize it. They've looked at 4 options, and these are very simplified options. But this takes all of the wages and all of the employees. It measures them against the 60th percentile of the market and calculates how far off we are in each of these service areas. And option A includes all employees. And the dollar figure is a little over $1 million. Option B just considers mid-level and the frontline employees. And that number is around $878,000. Option C is just looking at frontline employees only. And that's about $739,000. And then option D is what we've looked at as positions in crisis, we call it. And these are positions that we are having a hard time actually getting applicants because the wages aren't competitive enough and there's not a lot of people in those areas applying for those jobs. And this also includes specifically the police department, but it also includes some positions in other departments that we're having a tough time filling. So there's kind of a broad range that the council has looked at, and they'll continue to look at here in this hearing tonight. And so I just want to make sure you're aware of that. Okay, so that's kind of one issue sitting over there. We got this other issue where we've been going along, as you've heard from a couple of employees and former employees tonight, where the service level to the residents is starting to suffer because of short staffing. As you heard from a former police officer tonight, that police officers can't be proactive because they just have to run from call to call and cover their duties for the day, and they can't actually take time to get that extra service that I think most of us are expecting is happening. Same thing with things like, even if you look at parks and mowing the grass and public works, you know, they're just putting out fires and not really getting ahead of the game. The department directors have looked at this, and we put together an estimate of about 18 to 23 full-time and 4 to 10 part-time positions is where we're short across the city. The city currently has about 200 employees total, roughly. If we were to do that all at once, this would be a large price tag in addition to the wage issue. So that'd be, you know, $1.6 to $2 million on top of that wage issue that we just covered. So there's a compounding issue that's happening. I will remind everybody, however, that we are not discussing adding positions tonight. This is just about the wage issue tonight. Okay, so getting into why we're here, the actual vote tonight is to amend the city budget. The city adopted a budget last summer, and this is to amend the budget. They're going to consider those alternatives that I just outlined, and they're going to vote on whether they want to amend the budget to include the additional money for raises, depending on, you know, where the council lands tonight. As far as the tax implications, again, this would all happen in August, not tonight. But just to give you a kind of, for everybody trying to calculate, okay, what does that mean for me? If you look at the highest scenario, which was that option A, if it were a little over $1 million, that's about a 32% city tax increase, which would be about $115 a year, or about $9.50 a month. So for those of us who have a mortgage, you would see on your mortgage payment would go up about almost $10 a month on the average home. The average home assessed value in Syracuse is $400,000, around there. Now, one thing that everybody should be aware of is that, and you probably already are, is last year the county and the cities came together and decided that the paramedics service was going to shift down to the cities. So the county is getting out of the paramedic business, and the cities are going to be required to pick that up. Last year, the council made a decision on how we're going to fund that. They're trying to spread it out a little more. But there's already consideration for $450,000 for that paramedic service to be added in August. So that could be a compounding factor. And that's $48 or $4 a month. Again, there's options they have to look at if there's ways to reduce that. I'm just giving you the straight dollar amount of what it could be, okay? Taxes generally. If someone were to ask you, how much money does the average home provide in taxes to the city, what would your answer be? Just rhetorical. And a lot of people do know what it is, but there's still a lot of people that feel like all of their taxes go to the city. The average tax, that's probably too small to see, sorry. The average tax bill total in the city is probably around $2,700. But that's the total tax bill. The amount that actually goes to the city is this green part of the pie here. And the average is about $363 of your taxes actually goes to the city. Okay. The lion's share goes to the school district. And then you've got the county, which is about $300. And then you've got all of your other taxing entities. So keep in mind that when someone says a 32% increase to your taxes, that's not on the total tax bill. That's just on the $360 that you pay every year to the city. So that's important to know the magnitude of the issue for the residents. Okay. And then finally, I'll get into where we compare with the other cities. As Mr. Lund had mentioned earlier, Clearfield was at the top, but we currently sit down around close to Kaysville, Farmington, Layton area in terms of tax rate down there in some of our, as compared to some of our neighboring cities. Now you'll see blue and green. That's important to know that some cities don't have, in Davis County, some cities don't have a fire department. They have a regional fire department essentially that is a taxing entity. So if anyone in the North Davis Fire District, Clearfield, West Point, Sunset, if they came and said, hey, my city taxes are way lower than Syracuse. What they're not telling you is that they pay an additional tax just for their fire department. And so in order to compare apples to apples here, you have to add that back in, okay? If looking at like the most expensive scenario, if option A were adopted tonight and that were translated into a full tax increase in August, this is where we would end up. So the red would be the potential rate increase from tonight's meeting, which would get us to about third in the county. And then there's that yellow piece, which is the total amount of the paramedic adjustment. And so if they were to do kind of the whole enchilada option, if you will, that's what that would look like. Just so as everybody's aware of that. Okay. Okay, so just recap, they're just talking about the staffing issue. I'm sorry, the wage issue. The decision tonight is not an immediate tax increase, but it will likely obligate the council to take a tax increase in August. And that's why we advertise it this way, because we wanted to get your attention because it matters. Quite frankly, there are cities that are doing the same thing, adjusting wages. I've reached out to them and I don't know if they're having hearings like this. It doesn't sound like it. I think some of them are kind of just going to wait for July and August to figure it out later. But we wanted to make sure that you heard before they made the decision so that you could have a chance to weigh in on that. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Steve, did you have anything you wanted to add before we open?
Not at this time.
Okay, thank you. So again, to reiterate, there are multiple parts to this, but tonight we are just dealing with the wage increase to current staff. We've already begun to hire the paramedics, so I don't feel like that's realistic that we would ever go back on the 14% that's already there. And were we to take on the staffing component, that's another even larger portion, but that is not on the table tonight, just to be clear. All right, so I'm going to open this up for public hearing. At this point, because we do have this advertised, if you ask questions following the public hearing, we will be able to answer those, but not as a question and answer response. So I open this for public hearing. If anybody wants to come forward and share their thoughts or comments.
My name is Craig Johnson, 2148 West, 2375 South, Syracuse. As far as other options besides property tax increases, that's where I want to focus on. There needs to be a deep dive into every department in looking at everything that's being spent. And if that's not appropriate, then that can go instead of tax increases. And also one other thing, I was just doing some quick research. An acre of land, I don't know if this is accurate or not, but 1 acre of land out by Bluff Road is going for $906,000. I don't know if that's correct or not. This is all from the internet. But
well, we know it's true then.
but I was just wondering if the possibility of getting rid of the selling the land, the 50 acres of the regional park, that's 50 acres. If that was 50 acres at even 100,000 per acre, that's quite a lot of money. That could cover that $1 million right there. So I think it's all about priorities of the city and what the proper role of government is. You know, to me, safety, protection, and things like that, service, those high level protective services is the highest priority of our city government. And parks and things like that could be, you know, they're good and all, but that's not the highest priority. And so that could be a possibility is selling that 50 acres of land that you have. And that would save you tons of money and not developing that land too, which has also been a source of contention anyways. So that's just one idea. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I'm going to close public hearing. Council, I open this up for your discussion on the subject of where you think we should head with this. Who'd like to begin?
I would like to address what was just said about selling the property. Let's just say that we could sell that property, which it's set aside for something specific, and that's part of the agreement with the developers, but that would take care of it for 1 year. And then what about after that? So that's what we're going into. Somebody else had mentioned earmarking. Basically, was it Parkinson's law? And it's really true that once something is earmarked for something specific, it rarely, if ever, returns. If it's a project, that's what the issue is. If it's a project, if it's a special project, and then you're kind of irritated because they say it's a one-time thing, but we know this is not a one-time thing. We know that inflation, once inflation comes, inflation stays. I have never seen it decrease except for maybe a volatile gas market. You know, that might be the only thing. And maybe there'll be a sharp bubble burst for the housing, and then it immediately escalates to what it was before and then goes from there. So I think that those are maybe different issues if we're talking about an earmarking, and this wouldn't be earmarking. This would be an ongoing thing that has to happen because staffing issues are an issue and will continue to be an issue, and inflation will not. I don't think we'll ever see a decrease there. So I just wanted to address a couple of those comments. we've talked about a moratorium on our mixed use in some of our developments. And I think that as we've heard from some of our citizens tonight, we've talked about sales tax revenue and other funding options. And I completely agree. There have to be other funding options, which is where we come into people being upset about changes in the nature of Syracuse in general and not wanting to maybe introduce or accept some of those changes, which would come with affordable housing options that would increase property taxes on a smaller scale. It's not well known that a large lot actually doesn't pay for itself. We tend to think, well, I paid taxes on this large lot and I'm appraised at this value, but it's actually, we have to compensate for the larger the lots are, the more compensation happens on a city level. Excuse me. And so I'm completely supportive of looking at other funding options, but it also should be noted that commercial only comes with residential. And if you've ever had to get a demographic study to get a loan from a bank for a brick and mortar business, you'll understand that they'll say, prove to us you have the support in that city. And the only way you can do that is to show the rooftops. And the only way that rooftops will make sense for the bank to loan you that money is if you hit a certain mark. And if you don't, they just say, I'm sorry, it's not a viable business. And I know that because I've done that. And I know how difficult it is to hit that demographic mark. And you're trying to pull from a radius of a certain amount of city space. And so just simply saying increase our commercial is an enormous butterfly effect and a domino that hits a whole bunch of other pieces over that they say, only if this, only if that, and as soon as. And those are all things that are up for debate. So we talked about other ways to fund. And one of those options we've talked about is grants. And we know that Syracuse is considered an affluent city. And they tend to not be quick to offer grants to us because of the affluence there. So that's just something to consider as well. So those are just some of my thoughts on it. I think that we do want to be proactive and not reactive, but sometimes when there's an emergency situation, we do have to be reactive. And then our goal would be to stop the bleeding and then to see about the future health of all of our departments. And so I think that we are forced into a reactionary state because on a federal level for the last 2 years, we've seen an enormous burden that has been forwarded to all of us. So those are some of my thoughts about this and I'll send it to others now.
I was just going to also mention that the discussion around where these dollars come from, I think the discussion around sales tax revenues and where those are at will take place as we actually discuss the actual tax increase. And so if there are efforts to couple some of the property tax increases that are going to have to come with some small portion of sales tax, which is a volatile tax, and we can't really, it's very difficult to budget on sales tax. That'll come in the future. And I think that's the discussion that we'll be making over the next several months through the budget process. And so I want to make sure that you're aware we are going to be doing that. And that's a responsible thing that we need to do. So we're not just burdening you guys with that. And so the same thing goes with the budgets. Every department will go through every one of their budgets and they'll decide areas that we can create efficiencies, or if there are ways to reduce the burden or to stop the bleed in some cases. So I just wanted to make sure that was also stated.
So one of the things that I would like to point out that I think we're kind of stepping past and talking past here is our employees are hired to take care of the issues within the city. Our city citizens want parks, they want walking trails, they want better roads to drive on. And although I will say very direct that we are looking at every single outlet that we can, but as much as we want sales tax to pay for all of our employees, It's not that, I mean, this isn't the food service industry. They're our employees for our city and ultimately our responsibility. So that's kind of where it just falls at the bottom line of it. If we're not paying them a fair wage across the board, then we need to look at that. And we need to look at how we're going to pay them that. And ultimately, they're our responsibility to pay. They're our job to give them a fair wage. So we're trying to find it everywhere else we can. But that will be a last resort, but it's a resort that we have to take responsibility for.
So I'm, as some of you may know, I'm very new to the council. And we learned, I learned of this on Friday of last week at our planning session. So during that planning session, it was a chance for me to understand. And one of the questions that I posed was, as we were looking at the wage discrepancies from city policy and the challenges we're having in certain groups, one of my questions that I posed is what many of you are posing is what alternatives or what different levers do we have to pull other than simply a property tax increase? And so it was quite educational for me talking through these issues. So, one of the revenue streams that the city has is from new developments and impact fees. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this. But impact fees cannot be used for wages or personnel. So that is set by state statute. So, and that's kind of taken off the table unless people are willing to, go to their state legislators and have them change that law. So we don't have that. Sales tax is another tool that's been brought up. Steve, isn't sales tax our largest revenue source?
It is.
So sales tax in the city is already our largest revenue source, and it grows on average by about 5 to 7% per year, correct?
Pre-COVID, yes. Normally, yeah.
So we've had some higher growth during COVID, but historically it grows at about 5 to 7% per year. Now, it's a little bit volatile, and some have mentioned that we shouldn't plan on that, but historically 5 to 7%. So we can account for some of that, but we already looking at that. We also within the city can set a portion of the sales tax, correct? But we've already maxed that out. We're already at the highest sales tax that we're allowed to charge within the city. So our other option is, of course, bringing in new businesses and new opportunity to increase sales tax, which is awesome. And I think we want to look at that as a council. But it's not an immediate fix, right? It's not something that we just can do overnight. And so we've got to work on plans to improve that. And so then it comes to, well, what about looking at opportunities to, decrease in other areas? The largest expense portion of our budget, our city budget, is personnel, correct?
Correct. General fund's about 75% of the
Yes,
total budget.
about 75%. So yes, I think it's prudent that we examine and look where we can cut, but it's unlikely that we're going to be able to substantially cut other areas outside of personnel to make up these types of differences. So then we're kind of left to one of our last tools, which is a property tax increase. And I think we need to do that carefully, and it needs to be done, thoughtfully as well. So that's my thought. I just wanted to let people know kind of some of the things we're thinking about.
That's a good informative thought.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Did you want to comment on this?
First of all, I agree with, we understand the amazing staff we have. We understand that the goodwill of staff in staying here is not enough to keep someone. You have to pay someone what they're worth. Now, as has been mentioned, we've generally shoot for between 50 and 60.
50 to 60th percentile, which means out of 10 cities, we will pay more than most of them, but not all of them. And I think that is a good policy. Being at the very top is also really expensive. And I understand the issues a lot of the community is facing, especially with inflation taking off everywhere. I mean, we're all undergoing some type of compression because, you know, with I think inflation is somewhere between 4 and 7%. And I don't know how many of us have already gotten your raises this year. I hope you all got 10%. If you didn't, this means that we have a need for the citizens. We're elected by you. And our goal is to make sure that not only are we representing you, but we're also taking care of the staff that take care of you. So it's a tightrope we get to walk because we understand the value of what we have, but we also understand the importance of your pocketbook and your livelihoods. And so this is a delicate balance. Are we looking for recommendations at this point?
Well, I would like to share a couple of comments.
Okay, go ahead. But that's kind of my thoughts. That's kind of what's leading into what I'm going to recommend.
After Dave, I've got a couple more things that I learned that I'd like to share as well.
So, I mean, I think it is important to recognize, and Jordan, you made this point, that we represent the people as well as the staff. And they both have needs that we have to consider. I'm very cautious, and I'm sharing this. Council, we have 2 council members who've never been through a city budget process yet. We'll do that in the next couple of months. And there are a lot of things that get exposed in that process. So I would urge council that while we have to address some emergency issues at this point, to maybe hold off until we're able to go through that process on the bigger issue, because there will be things that come up. There will be things that we have not yet exposed, and we can't until we get into the deep dive of the numbers. So that's a caution that I throw out. All of this can still happen going forward. It's just a matter of, are you committed before you know the rest of the story? So that's my caution. And more discussion is warranted. Paul?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So some of the questions that I ask, and I have to thank Brody for being available this weekend as I was trying to wrap. I think we all probably overburdened him this weekend, but there were certain things I'm trying to understand as we're addressing this very delicate balance between making sure that we have staff that is well taken care of so they can take care of us as citizens, but also so that as citizens, or so as a council, we are representing the will of our citizens as well. And so I asked some questions about kind of staff and longevity of staff and turn rates and things like that. Brody fact checked me as I say, make sure I'm getting this accurately. But so of our department heads, all of our departments heads have been with the city for 5 years or longer. Out of our staff, we're at about 40% that have been 5 years or longer with the city. And we have a turnover rate in the last year of about 20%, which is likely to be higher. But these are indicators that there's other benefits. And I think we've talked about this. There's other benefits in working for the city other than just, wage. Not to say that we don't need to be competitive or things like that, but there's some things telling about our, the makeup of our staff and how long they've been with us. So in keeping that in mind, I kind of echo what Dave says in that we have a budget to plan for the upcoming fiscal year that is going to uncover additional needs for our city. It's going to likely involve additional resources and funds that we may not currently have. And so I think my caution here as well is that that we, look at those areas in crisis that we can deal with now. And then let's deep dive as we go through the budgeting process and uncover everything and deep dive into what we're going, what additional revenues we might be having, what additional expenses we might be able to cut. I think we owe that to the citizens.
Other discussion?
Yeah, I feel like, hold on. We're looking at this every time we change from talking about our employees, we start talking about departments, and we're shifting it. We're making it seem like the human beings that work in the police department deserve a fair wage, but the human beings that work in Parks and Rec do not. Sorry, you're not used as much, so we can't pay you as much. This is my opinion. I'm not speaking for anybody else but myself. Please understand that. I'm a single mom. $10 a month would affect me, but I'm a single mom. A pay increase would also affect me. And that's the way I take the approach to look at it. These are all human beings sitting over here and in here around us. And as one of our public works gentlemen stepped up and said that it's not just one department, it's all of them. And they have a right to a fair wage that should no longer be put on hold. I said this in our Friday meeting, and if you refer to the video on it, you'll hear this a bunch of times. I feel like our staff in Syracuse City has been conditioned on the stand that we're family. If I could tell you how many times I've heard we're family from people on city council and the former mayor as well as the current mayor, I couldn't count. They stuck around on the understanding that we're family, and at some point they will be compensated fairly. Now they are asking for that point to be recognized. And I don't blame them at all. And like I said, I can see it from both sides. On both sides, it would affect me as a human being and an individual and a citizen. But I also can't justify not paying people what they're worth. We talk about sales tax, but which Smiths do you shop at? We talk, which gas station do you get your gas from? That's all little things that you got to stay consciously aware of in order to support our own city sales tax, so we don't have to keep hiking up other taxes in order to pay them. But the reality is they're still human beings and they need to be paid a fair market value wage.
So I want to be clear that when I'm asking us to wait on some of the project, we have identified
some of the people.
Some of the scope of this. Yeah, there were 4 possible options. Of course, we could take any other option that's there. But keep in mind that even the lowest option identifies that we have shortage in parks. We have positions we haven't filled in years. So that was included in that. We have that same issue in public works. That's included in that. But my point is that we're going to expose other things. And 2 of the things that we're going to deal with very shortly, well, 3, the budget is going to take the next couple of months. We are addressing the employee recruitment and retention policy, which in that, we want the freedom to be able to put things in place that may not be wages that would help us retain employees.
But this is just to get them equal across the board right now.
What I'm suggesting here is that policy, and also the issues of benefits that we've been asked to review. If you go all in here, those levers are not available anymore because we don't have any more money.
This is just making us equal across the board. And please understand that we're not giving them any extra. We're not giving them anything to stay. We don't match their 401k right now. We don't input into a retirement for them. We don't give them any incentive.
That's actually not true.
Which one? The 401k, we do give them in the beginning of the year. What is it? 1,000?
Well,
No,
they all have pensions that we pay into.
Pension was paid for by.
Okay, I'll correct that. Pension is paid for by the city. 401k is a big issue across the board for a lot of them. And it's not just one specific department. It's a benefit. Benefits aren't pay. Benefits are like a benefit of the job in order to get them to choose us. When you're looking for a job, you have pay, and your pay should be equal from all within your industry, correct? It's the benefits that get people to come and say, okay, I want to pick you because you have a little extra on the side. That's a perk, a benefit. That's why it's a benefit. So if this is just making us equal across the board is something that we will likely do anyway. I feel like telling them we're likely going to give you a pay raise anyway, just not right now. So this has to wait till later.
Couple of things. One of the reasons why I am concerned about doing this too early is because we have for years told people that the truth in taxation policy is one that we follow, prescribed by the state. And that means that we advertise on their bill what the change might be. We hold a hearing that can only be held in August. And that's where they have a chance to share some of this. If we expand this beyond the crisis point, we're kind of preempting that process. So as much as we tried very hard, and I tried, Rhodey tried, the city put out posts, we tried really hard to make sure people knew that there was a hearing tonight, that this could be discussed. But there will still be people from experience who will come forward and say, you went out of sequence, that's not fair. And so what I'm trying to do is be transparent with everybody and make sure they get that chance to weigh in. I'm not suggesting that we're not going to address those issues, except for we're not that far off on what we're saying, because when I'm saying that we're going to have to look at benefits, things like 401k, what I'm also suggesting is if you do all of this now, we may get to that point and say we have zero room to move. So that's not an option anymore. I want to keep that an option so that we can discuss and decide where we're going to pull the levers and not just, now I don't vote, so I'm just sharing some experience here, but I think that we need to keep our options open through the budget cycle, which is only a couple of months. That's our process that's prescribed by the state. But it's up to you, and the motion will come from one of you. So.
And I agree. We've got to be able to retain employees. We've got to be able to offer competitive wages. I am concerned with our citizenry being involved, being able to be notified and involved in that process and work through that budget process. We may end up, with something similar through that budgeting process to option A. But I want to be able to go through that process. So far we've had kind of a weekend a little more than a weekend to go through this. And that's why, my preference where I'm leaning is kind of to deal with crisis. And then we can look through the budgeting process and have that proper truth in taxation hearing and be able to address things, I guess, through that proper procedure.
And if that happens by, it's committed by the latest June 1st, we have to have voted on it. But we're going to work on that in March and April and have a full solution in May. So we're not talking about way out there. We're talking about just looking at everything. So, because we haven't even talked about budget or benefits yet. And this item only came forward as the crisis positions. It got expanded so that we weren't making that decision in a vacuum, but this never started as a discussion of we're going to fix it all mid-year. Started as a discussion of can we even afford to fix the crisis, and what will that mean to the rest of the process?
So part of my challenge is just the timing is very rushed, and just understanding what each item includes. And if we're willing to sit here tonight and go through every item and say what is included in crisis, for instance, which positions across which agencies, everything, that would be helpful, and I'd feel more comfortable. But ultimately, yeah, a weekend is not enough. And I don't think I've spent enough time with Brody. I need to spend all my time with him, it seems like lately, figuring out how to solve this. And it sounds like others are too. But in regards to the staffing issues, I mean, ultimately, if we are all convinced that there has to be an action taken to do something towards what is going to ultimately be supported again in the truth and taxation hearing. So I would say anything that we're doing that we feel comfortable with doing in June, we probably should do today. I think that, and I don't know how far that is. We need to discuss that. But I think that anything we're willing to do in June, we need to do today.
So you just asked a question of what we considered in crisis.
Yeah.
And I'll answer that because I think there are people that want to understand that. One of those is our police department. We realize the wages are not comparable and we are losing staff. And we are at a crisis point of continuing to provide service. So that's the biggest chunk. That would get our police department to the 75th percentile. But as rapid and as many hearings as we've heard are scheduled, we don't believe that will hold more than 6 months. So that's why we're overshooting a little bit to make sure that we have time to react. Others that are considered there, Parks and Rec has not filled a majority of their positions, of their summer positions for years. And so we have included some to deal with that lack of staffing to hopefully attract people so that we don't have everybody on a mower and still don't get everything done because we just don't have any bodies. So that's part of that. We have in here wages in the various public works funds because we know that we can't keep up with the timing of fixing some of the issues in the city. So those are the ones that are considered in crisis. And one in CED, we have had 3 postings for a building inspector with no one applying. So clearly the market is telling us that what we're offering isn't good enough to get an applicant. So yeah, we have to fix that immediately, or we're just gonna have no laborers in those departments. That we get. The rest of this has to be dealt with. And I was very clear to Brody when I started that we have to examine it. But you're right, Seth, we haven't had very much time to go through that all. And so what I'm suggesting is that we take the budget cycle and utilize that time because we don't know which levers we're going to pull or how many, with all of them. Maybe we do. But we got to talk about all of the things that go into it, some of which is, what are we going to do about benefits? And if we do something, I've been talking to Steve about this, let's say we add benefits, that's money. So that's money that comes out of the general fund that we now can't spend on this. So we have to take that into account. Recruitment and retention. Maybe we decide that we have to change the level at what we are considered comparable wages. But I made this point publicly when somebody asked me my philosophy on this online, and that is, we are a business. We're government, but we're also a business. So any positions that are open that has a long line, let's say we open a position and 40 people show up, the market is telling us that's a fair wage for that job because there are plenty of people willing to do it. If we, like we've said in these crisis positions, advertise a job and no one shows up, the market just told us that's not a fair wage. That's why nobody's willing to do it. So we have to kind of ask those questions and make sure we're clear before we take, unilateral action.
I think we are in a position that we're being compelled to respond right now. I agree with Seth's thought that if we're willing to do it in June, we should be willing to do it now, because in the meantime, all of the issues that are not, let's say all the arms and legs that are still attached in those departments are about to be severed. And in the meantime, we have 7 months in between now and when we're doing a truth and taxation, and we will be at a crisis throughout every department. And we are placing our department heads in a position of having to explain to possible candidates that they hope we do something about it in the future. We don't know if we will, and those people will likely go elsewhere. So I don't think that we are in the position to sit back and have a conversation that lasts for months saying we'll take care of this in August, when the whole point of having this discussion today is because we're in a crisis mode. Otherwise, we would have just waited until August and we wouldn't have called a special hearing and had this conversation. So I think that it's rather a moot point to say there will be other options later, and it's entirely possible we'll come up with other funding. And remember that this conversation today is to say it's likely we will need to raise taxes to pay for this unless other funding is available. So it makes it so that we have those options available to us. And if there is suddenly something that comes up, or we're able to work out some developments that give us excess funding that we can put towards these staffing positions, then fantastic. We'll be thrilled and embrace that. In the meantime, this keeps us from losing a large amount of morale, as well as staff members and potential candidates for hiring.
Jordan.
I'd like to offer some middle ground, because I agree with everything that everybody said. Staff, you're totally worth it. We understand there's crisis. We understand that some positions have not been touched for 4 years, which needs to be addressed. So we're going to change that. So my recommendation is, first of all, that so there is the option D, which covers all the positions in crisis. We do that, but I don't think that's enough. I think what we need to do is make sure that every single staff member is at a minimum at the 50th percentile. So I'm okay doing everyone in crisis because we cannot lose anyone. We cannot afford to, exactly. And everybody else.
Everyone in crisis to the 60th percentile?
Well, as we outlined in D, I think D outlined a change for the police, because we know that we're falling behind there.
Can you put that up on the board for us so we can look at those options?
So I know you have some things.
He's proposing a different option than is on the.
And then, but like I said, I don't think option D gets us there, because there's a lot of staff that is below. You should never be below 50%, the 50th percentile. You should be paid what your position is worth. And so I think all employees across the board, minimum 50%. We get them to the 50%. And those that are in crisis because they haven't been addressed for a while, we need to go all the way to the policy, and with the promise, and I know that you said if we're going to do it in July, we should be able to do it now. But I think I want to give us some room to make sure that we're doing everything right, because a weekend is not enough time to consider everything. But my plan, and I'm willing to go through and say, I want to get everybody to the 60th by July, but we need to go through the budget cycle. I think that meets what you're after and what Paul is after. I think it meets what Jen is after, to try and get everybody to the right place. I know you guys are kind of on the same track. That would be my counter proposal that I think is a good compromise between all the different plans. Seth, I know that there was some issues that you had on a couple of things. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So as I've looked at these proposals, I think they're a good starting point for us to have the discussion with you guys and amongst ourselves. But again, I don't know that they personally, for me, meet the need that we're seeing right now. So when we're describing crisis, for instance, we talked about who were the crisis positions, and if we could say, okay, every position that has had multiple postings and no applicants, if we could tie that to every single position, I would agree. Okay, that's a crisis position. I don't know that that's the case, because again, we haven't seen them, right? We can't go through every single one and go, is that a crisis position? But then I think of other positions, and I've heard this from our Parks and Recreation department. We're one, decision to leave our department, and if this one position leaves, it's a crisis position, and he's really stressed with his workload, and we're putting him on the brink, and we may get a bunch of applicants, but would we ever get that quality? No, you wouldn't get that quality.
Can I ask a question to that,
Yeah.
Seth? So using that example of the Parks Department position that is considered in crisis and might leave, what is the, we've got Parks and Rec in the crisis column of 119,000. Is that discretionary for the manager to use to address whatever crisis positions, or is this?
I think it's tied to the
No,
actual
that's-
pre-allocated time?
That gets everybody to the 60th in that department.
Each individual in that
gets-
department?
Yeah, in that department to 60th, because they haven't been addressed.
Well, not for
yet
the
in
crisis
review
option, though.
cycle, and they were
For the D crisis option.
No, not,
No, not the top people, the
no,
top.
the,
is-
the D only gets you 119K into Parks and Rec, and they've got a $237,000 option A.
So that doesn't.
Yeah, it really just addresses, and I think that's one thing we're talking about right now is that we know law enforcement wages are just skyrocketing, and we've got to do something to be reflexive and responsive to that. That's a given. But we've heard from our public works folks, we've heard from others. I know the situation with Parks and Rec, when we have a director out there working on a lawnmower, we've got a problem.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where I think all of these options are kind of missing the mark, because if you go through and say, okay, just the frontline employees, well, it's not just the frontline employees that are in crisis, and the mid-level and frontline, we know we have some individuals that are underpaid at near the top of the position. I know that there's some people saying, well, they make a lot of money, and that's not really fair, because
They can make a lot more.
they can make a lot more somewhere else, and if we lose them, it's a lot more expensive. And so I think I think D covers the positions in crisis, which includes a lot of these, but like I said, that's not enough. I think every single position should be paid what that position is worth, and that's where the 50th percentile gets you on across the board. And there are some that it might not affect very much, and that's okay. But there are some that it really does affect and is a difference because they haven't been touched for 4 years.
So you're saying with the police, they would go to 50 rather than?
No.
75.
The police are option, I would say option D. So I'm going to call this, it's really option B plus. It is get all the positions that we are at a clear and present danger for to the pay that our policy states. But I recognize that doing everything right now is, I get the need to go through the budget cycle for people that have never been through one. Let's find the money and let's go through it the correct way. But the 50th percentile gets it everybody to where they need to be, and get a few people that haven't been addressed in a while to where we can be even more competitive, because those are the ones that haven't been touched for a while.
So one other thing to consider here is that because we put this together short term, not every position did we get all of the data back to consider. And we should.
There's still research to be done.
We need to finish that research, to be fair. So but that's okay. I mean, we can do that. We just need to make sure that we're giving time to get that done.
Once again, isn't this discussion in this hearing about what we expect to have happen? What is this decision about right now? Because we keep pushing it off as if we're stating this in stone, but we're not. What are we doing?
Well, we can't go back. You can't give people raises tonight and then in 2 months.
Why would you
say-
want to take them away?
Right.
though?
Well, that, I know, that's the point. But so what I'm asking to be cautious about is not go so far that
We don't want to.
there are positions we don't have all the data yet. And if we do that, then, and we find the data doesn't weigh up to what we've done, we can't go back.
What about the positions that we do have the data for?
I think we should take action because we have the data. That would be the stuff that we know is in crisis, and
We have a data for a lot more than what
You're right, we
option
do.
D. We have a data for.
But not, we don't have it all for all of it. That was.
How many
very clear on
positions are we
Friday.
missing? Do we know data for?
That's a tough one. Steve?
I think we've collected most of the cities. I'm trying to think if, Brody, do you know offhand how many cities we're missing on the benchmark?
As of Friday, there's still positions that we only had 4 to 6 responses.
Yeah, and there are some positions where that's all you're going to find. The benchmark is pretty accurate. It's not a perfect system, but you'll be able to you'll be able to find other more data each time you look.
So how many positions do we not have data on? Do we know specifically?
So we collected it by city, right? And what I think what Brody's trying to say is we've collected most of the city's data. There might be a few updates to city information because some of the information.
So all the positions have data. on
Yeah, and some of them was out of date in the system, so we were trying to get that information from the cities. We did get most of that back in time for this packet material. There might be a few outliers that we didn't include, But this is, 80-90% of.
Well, I have a feeling we're going to see an increase in a lot of the city's data from surrounding neighborhoods as well, because
Yeah.
they're all having the same issue. So even if we have correct data right now, it will change over the course of the next few months. And so we'll always be trying to play catch up. And that concerns me that we are going to be several months behind of surrounding communities, which once again puts our departments in jeopardy.
And it seems like it's a repetitive cycle, because what we're talking about for right now is that very bottom row. And if we went with A, Steve, and we talked about this on Friday, I'm just asking, do we have enough in surplus to get us through the rest of the year with that?
Yeah, so we do have one time and surplus that would get us from February to June of this year without any.
With
tax.
under that block A, and that covers all of our employees to a fair wage.
Yeah, I mean,
But you do know
we're
that,
going into savings, but yes.
yeah,
I'm aware.
and that means that you have to find the money for the next year, and that means that you are committing to a tax increase.
Well, I would like to think we're committing to their employment. That's what that is.
So that's what I think.
Yeah, that's what that is we're committing to keeping our employees at a fair pay. And I, like Seth said, if we're gonna stand on something in June, we should be comfortable doing it now.
So let me pose a question, or at least ask a question for my clarification. So any option that we obligate ourselves to, we are assessing a potential property tax increase to that. Are we assessing that property tax increase tonight, or do we?
No.
We do that?
You can't do that
No,
until
but
August.
Okay.
When we realize that the only place the money is in the property tax increase, which.
Okay,
is
so
what we
look
know.
at that, for this alone, on this alone, if we went with option A and we committed ourselves to a property tax increase that would for the property tax, at most, without looking at sales tax, be that $9.58, correct?
Which is about 32%.
Well, but per month is like $9.58 per household.
$14 for.
But we're looking at just this.
14%.
But we're looking at just this.
But then we're looking at this like in a bubble, right? Because
Well, it would be added too.
because we've got staffing issues too that we're gonna have to look at during the budget cycle. So what was it, 23 full-time and 10 to 14 part-time? And so that, maybe that's why I'm thinking I want that budget cycle process to be able to evaluate
But
it.
I agree that we need the budget cycle process to evaluate what we're going to add to them for future.
So I
But
guess-
right now, just to put them at standard is what we're discussing.
Okay,
So why wouldn't we put them at standard now? So they're already hopefully still at standard once we get to that point.
I hear you. What I'm trying to protect is if we make this commitment tonight, we are at a minimum 44%, the 14 plus the 20.
$118 a year is what it was, right?
We're at a minimum at 44%.
You're using a lot of big percentages. Can we talk about like
Well,
the
because
actual
we have to
dollars?
by law.
And I
advertise.
understand that, but it is, and we can advertise it, but break it down to what it is. It ends up being for this alone, about $115 per year,
Okay,
right?
so it's not as accurate.
Thank you, Ms. Lisa.
No, it's not as accurate, and you have to be careful because everybody has an assessed different property value. So what's
Up to
consistent,
400,000 is what we're talking
That's an
about.
that's an
That's what.
that's an average.
That's what I'm saying. We're talking about an average of 400,000 will be $115, correct?
Okay, but if you simplify it that way, you're not being fair to the 99% that don't have that.
Can we figure out the average up across the board, what it would end up being?
We did.
No, I mean, not for property tax, like for this specific scenario.
Okay, so here's the point. We are by law have to advertise the percent
I'm aware of that.
because that is consistent for all people in the city. So what I'm suggesting here, and this has nothing to do with the other part, is we would be at 44% guaranteed. Then as we go through the budget cycle, anything else we discover that we don't have money for adds on to that. And we know that we have benefits to adjust. We know that we have other wages to adjust, staffing levels to adjust, and we have the retention policy to adjust. So we've already started at a 44%, and we're only going to have to add to it. So that's what I'm being cautious about, is not committing that before we know what all the other factors are, because if we know what all the factors are, every year in budget, we stop and we say, okay, how much can we deal with? And what is the highest priority? We're not doing that. We're saying at this point, wages are the only priority, and everything else will take a back seat to that, because we haven't had time to discuss it yet. So I'm trying to keep the options open.
Which could include staffing levels.
It can, and it probably will.
I think what we heard, like at the worst case, at least without anything else, it could be up to 110%, which in dollars
Equals to.
was about
370
something dollars.
Right, per year.
Yeah.
Per year.
For the average $400,000.
$400,000. So someone with a double that, you can do that.
Bigger home is bigger
Thank
money,
you for
smaller
that.
home is smaller money. We,
Appreciate that.
So I want to offer an alternative.
go ahead.
So, okay, as I've spent a lot of time going through this and trying to figure out what approach we can take. And as I've talked to a lot of our department heads, I think that there's a comfort level in the community with all the feedback we've gotten, social media, emails, all that. I don't think the department heads feel comfortable taking a tax or, creating a mandated tax increase for their own salaries at this time. I feel that the department heads feel comfortable saying that their staff, if we're going to make a move now out of cycle and pre-budget, they would feel more comfortable letting that, be taken care of by supporting our lower
I got the
staff.
same understanding here.
Yeah, and I think that that's what we've heard, from the audience as well. And so I would consider the option to start from there and to work down. And then I think we've heard, first of all, from we know about our firefighter positions. We're still not getting applicants. Okay, so I would say, at least for them, we need to go to the 60th percentile. I think we need to do that.
We did.
The firefighters,
The arrest.
They come from a bigger.
Well, I guess,
So firefighters actually come from all the way down by Draper, because they work in different schedules.
well, we've addressed all of them except for the admin. So I
Yeah.
guess if we have to wait, I guess we could wait on the admin, but we kind of made a promise that we would, that's a smaller piece here. Law enforcement, we need to take care of them. I think the crisis positions, though, need to be identified again there. And I think we need to start with our PO 1, 2, and 3 and give them the 75th percentile, and then have a graduated scale down through the rest of the department outside of the highest earner, at least through June, until we get to the budget season. And then I think we need to raise across the board, everybody to the 50th percentile. So that would, we ran some numbers earlier. I think it's somewhere around 760,000 annualized. Is that something you could share? Or Steve?
I'd point to Steve.
So I don't know that I put you on the spot there. Sorry, but
We have anything.
Yeah, I'm not logged in. Hold on.
Do you want to repeat that again? Sorry.
in my head, it made perfect sense. So let me make sure okay, I'm not sure about the firefighters because that's the admin piece that we were just addressing. So I would entertain your guys' thoughts on that if we need to go to the 60th percentile now with the remaining 3 positions I believe we left out.
Can I clarify? My understanding was in December, we took everybody but the
chief.
senior management in the firefighters up to 60. Is that accurate or not?
That is accurate.
Okay.
They're already at 60 except for senior management,
And they're off.
which is
they're what?
scheduled to go in July.
Yeah, so I mean, that would be up to you guys if you think that we need to close that gap
Not up to
now.
me.
I know I'm saying the
Trying to
rest of
sort it
the
out.
council here.
Can we look at from what, I got the same impression from department heads about themselves, but we are aware of the Parks and Rec situation. What would it look like from without the department? Because we know that our department heads make a lot of money and it would be a bigger chunk in percentage wise and money dollars wise for them. Well, not percentage wise, but dollars wise to put them at that percentile. But what would it look like without having just the department heads?
So are you
I think-
saying?
I think
move
we saw
everyone to
that.
60th except for department heads? I guess I'm not
Yeah.
clear on the question.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah. well,
Mayor, can I add something?
Yes, please.
So I sent an email about 3:30 today with some of these revised requests from a couple of council members. In that email, it was another option, whatever you want to call it. The department heads were taken out. It was at the 50th percentile for all departments with the exclusion of police was at 75 and fire was at 60 for their frontline staff because we did that in November.
Sorry.
And then the third thing was in the police, there was a graduated step down, a revised proposal, which was 20% for a PO3, 15% for PO2, PO3, 12% for sergeant,
So 20% for PO1.
PO1,
PO1, okay.
15%,
That increase, which would take them to the 70th.
75th percentile, correct.
Okay. So many percentages flying around here.
I
So
know,
what was the total dollar?
So in the total, that was $761,000,
Annualized.
And
correct?
So 300,000. for the-
Roughly 300,000 for the remainder of the
But
year.
that doesn't get anyone in parks to 60th. but they
Keeps
have to-
everyone at 50.
Add the parks. Get them to, so we know that the 50th percentile for the parks, you had actually identified that. So the difference between that and the 237,000 is what?
And sorry, the one other thing, yeah. The positions in crisis and option D were kept at 60% in that proposal as well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, so option D does not include the police at the
75th,
75th.
police is 75th,
everybody else is 60.
crisis was 60, fire was 60, everyone else was 50.
How
I
did
think,
you do
I think
that?
you
That's
send
impressive.
a message to the others who are still here and still willing to work if we're saying, you haven't made a fuss, so here's 50 percentile for you, even though we state 60, we like to stay around 60. I just, I think there's so much value that's being dismissed for what all of these employees bring in experience and institutional knowledge and relationships with the staff that's under them as well as peers with them. And I think we are dismissing the value of the people who have not said we're in crisis or say we're heading towards crisis. And we're saying, well, until we hit that, we're not going to address you. And so I'm still more comfortable with hitting the 60 percentile.
So respectfully, I wish that we weren't trying to,
Workshop this here.
well, yes, absolutely. But also respectfully, there's a lot of talk about trying to convince staff that we don't care for them. If that's a feeling, then it's there. But we continually fight over what we can do, and we continually address this department by a department. And I think that, to be fair to the employees and to everybody out there that's listening, every time we've done a review, people have felt, for the most part, that we dealt with them fairly and we made adjustments. Now, we're out of sequence at this point of some of our reviews, and we've had hyperinflation, which has meant that we are not consistent with our policy for as long as we have been in the past. So those are the things that put us here. But the suggestion that we forever have not been respectful of employees is almost an indoctrination that I don't really care for, because we have taken care of needs. We have matched offers. We have gone beyond offers when people have suggested that they might part ways for more money. We have tried to provide better equipment or better resources to do their jobs. So I'm a little bit concerned that we talk so often about we don't care about you as a sort, because we do, and we have shown it. And in it, with all due respect, the evidence is in what we have done over the years. Yes, we have to do something now, but to continue to try and reinforce that we never cared about these people, as long as I've been here, we have fought for these people. We just have to do it within the parameters that we have. And all I'm suggesting tonight is that we identified some crisis which brought this to the agenda. And we have taken it so far beyond that because, and my concern is not that we don't end up there as much as we end up there without the process. That process is there for a reason, and we have to go through it in some cases.
We're not talking about not going through the process where this doesn't negate what we do in August.
It commits us before the process. So it makes the process where you never go backwards.
But it's an emergency situation.
Mr. Mayor, can I make a motion?
Go ahead. It's
I
yours to make.
actually would like to take Seth's proposal. I thought it was fair, but I do want to make sure that we include parks in the 60th as well.
Okay.
Are you okay with that, Seth?
I would second that.
Well, okay, so state very clearly for the record, because we have done so much, I'm going to ask you to state exactly what's in and what's out, at least department wise, so that we have a resolution that we can type up.
Jordan, before you do that,
I've already done it.
well, but I want to see the numbers associated with this.
Okay, so there can be further discussion.
Okay, yeah.
Just,
Okay, but go ahead,
but please.
Seth.
Well, that was,
Wait a minute, you
that's
just
the,
made
that's
the
the
motion.
emailed
You
option,
have to
but on top of
clarify.
that, adding parks to that.
I said I was taking Seth's motion. So
Can you?
So would
that's
you make the
emailed-
motion, Seth?
Could you repeat the motion? Like what?
Oh,
The
okay.
50th percentile?
Yep. Okay.
Okay, so let me sort this out.
So who would we be leaving at the 50th percentile?
City council. No.
I'm okay with that.
I don't think city council's even close.
We're not even
right
on
now,
this. Don't
so
worry about that.
that's,
I don't think we.
That's
that's
our
not
tonight.
on
We're
the
gonna deserve
table.
much less.
That is not be up for discussion.
So the only two departments in that proposal that were above the 50th percentile was police and fire. Police was at 75. Fire was at 60%.
So I'm going to attempt to
but
state.
But-
Okay, but if we put parks and rec at 60, what would be left at 50? What departments would be left at 50?
Everybody but those three.
Okay, but can
Okay,
you
so
name them for me?
yes,
Remember-
let me try to do this. Since you are not wanting to make the motion, I'm going to restate what.
No, I was
heard.
asking for some clarification on the motion. Before I could even do that, you jumped in there. My goodness.
So with that proposal that was also sent, it was the crisis positions at 60%, which is most of Parks and Rec. It wasn't every position. It was those identified as,
It would be
In option B.
119,000 of the 237,000.
oh, so your proposal didn't include all the crisis positions?
No,
It did.
It did. Okay,
did.
that's what I thought.
Okay. So I'm going to restate what I think we're saying, just so that it's clear. The motion is all of the positions in option D as listed in the packet, correct?
Mhm.
Okay. All of parks up to 60th percentile
Well, so
That-
and
as
fire.
long as this covers those people, then I'm okay with option D as stated.
Okay.
I can't.
Yes, we're gonna redo this motion.
Okay, that's why I was trying to be sure. what
Let
we're
him
saying.
state it and
Yeah.
then we can ask
Yeah.
clarification.
Okay,
So we're looking to get into a budget opening of about $760,000, it looks like to me. That was the option I designed, which I now has been so muddled, I don't know exactly how to get back to there, but if you wouldn't mind just stating it as it was described in there, is that okay, Steve?
sure. So the option that was sent out this afternoon for $761,000 was the police at 75%. It was the fire department at 60%. It was all the positions identified as in crisis at 60%. It also excluded department heads. The remaining departments were at 50%. And there was one additional thing with the police, that was the graduated payment up from 20% to 15% for PO 2 and 3, 12% for sergeant.
But really, I think that
Wait a
gets them
minute.
to that.
how does the 75th not cover that?
So the 75th would come in. at
I thought the
PO
75th
three,
already
or PO
covered
one.
that completely. I'm just point of clarification at this point.
So there was discussion with a couple council members about how if you go 20% on PO3, it puts them at a high enough wage that
Some of them would be like higher than Taylorsville, for instance.
Right, it'd be higher than a lot of the benchmark
And that's
cities.
the piece I don't know if we have actual data to that.
But yeah, how would that even work if we're saying 75th percentile?
No,
That
so
would
the 75th
automatically-
percentile starts at PO1.
The 75th percentile, the only position we benchmarked in the police was PO1 because that
Okay.
was the active data on the recruiting for the positions. It was
Okay,
the
and so your-
entry
your
level.
Percentages, that's what I understood.
Starts at
The
PO1.
percentages were actually based on data that you had.
Okay, so I'm going to just see if I restate this so that we're clear. This means that the new breakdown of police would be a PO1 gets moved to the 75th percentile. And then you're saying because we don't have enough data that you're adding for a PO2, how much?
The proposal was 15% for PO2, PO3.
15% on top of what a PO1 at 75% makes.
It'd be 15% of their existing wage
So
scale.
it's 15% on top of their existing wage.
Correct.
Okay.
So the 75th
And then a
was 20 and a half.
PO3 is how much?
Also 15 was the
Also
proposal,
15. And then sergeants,
was 12,
12. And did we go beyond that? We have a lieutenant and.
Yeah, the rest were-
5%
5%.
They were the same.
for everyone but the department head.
Okay.
It's all on that page 1 at the bottom of the page.
Yeah, well, we've said so much. I'm trying to make sure that I've written down the proposal so that when we go back to a record to see what we actually voted on, somebody knows. Okay, so. Yes, it is, but sometimes
Cassie to do it
I trust Cassie too.
and us
but
to approve the
sometimes
minutes if it's
we
wrong or
have
right.
had- Sometimes we have had meetings where we said we weren't very clear because too many people said too many things.
And I'm glad we clarified because I thought you were originally excluding parks, but if it covers all of option D, then I like it even better.
Okay. So,
But really, what the big thing here is this gets everyone to where they're supposed to be and gets the people that we haven't addressed in a while to where they
and keep
would have
in,
been 2 years ago.
and keep in mind the other Parks and Rec staff, I think they're the last agency that has not been benchmarked.
right, they have not been reviewed.
So they would be
So their
adjusted,
review-
they'll be adjusted in June regardless.
Their review is later this year.
Yes.
So what does that do to our roads?
Sewers.
It gives them all a raise.
To
Because they're all-
50%, not to 60?
To 60.
Most of your frontline workers are in that crisis.
They're in this mode.
Option D.
Here with the secondary, the storm fund, the culinary fund, they're all listed here. on-
So who is sitting at the 50 percentile?
Are you?
Like what?
I would be.
If-
I can go down the
with-
list if you'd
with
like.
this, would you please?
Justice Courts, Victim Services, Admin, Administration, Information Technology, Facility Maintenance, CED with the exception of building inspectors. Police would be at the 75th, fire would be at the 60th. Streets would be at the 50th with the exception of your frontline maintenance workers. Parks and Rec would be most of the department at the 60th because that is an option D. There are some upper management positions that are not in that crisis category. Secondary fund is at the 50th with the exception of maintenance workers, and the remaining utility funds are in that same boat. So it's 50th percentile except for the maintenance workers.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to ask the recorder, even though I wrote this down, do you feel like you have clarity on what the motion is?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Between the two of you, you
Yeah.
both
Yes.
motion, so we'll take one of them as the second. Okay.
Okay.
Any further discussion?
Yeah, I do want to be on the record to state that, I don't think that this is a perfect solution. I don't
Okay.
think any option we could have come up with tonight would be a perfect solution for logistic issues around the truth and taxation hearing and the budget process, or making sure everybody is made whole. But it's a big, big swing in the right direction. And I think I want to commit, and I want to publicly hopefully all of us commit that in the budget process, we work towards, option A or whatever it is that gets us that solution by this truth and taxation hearing. Because we want that, we are all saying that that's what we want to get to. I just don't feel personally that I have enough data or time to make that 100%, effort. So we're saving about $350,000 annualized on that number for now. But I want to hopefully commit all of us that we're willing to look at that and make sure that we hold true to the parks piece being completed, everything else being, everybody else being considered, and making sure that we can hopefully push the reset button on these salaries and ensure that we're where we need to be day one, FY23.
Can I ask for a point of clarification?
Yes.
So the dollar value is 761,000. Do we know what that equates for our citizens in a tax increase? Property
Yeah,
tax.
it was about 22% or about $81. Keep in mind, I'm generalizing this because there are some utility funds involved in this number. That would be like a utility rate increase instead of on the property tax.
Okay.
So can I
That's
ask-
typically about 10% of that number, so.
Those bottom 4 maintenance worker positions, 1, 2, 3, and 1. Why didn't we add those 4 positions into the 60%
Which-
lower?
Are they not in the crisis
Page,
category?
Which positions were those?
the maintenance worker 1.
They are included.
Are they?
Yep.
They're in
So which
the-
one wasn't? The street?
Basically, I believe it was crew leaders and up.
Okay, okay.
So on the Parks and Rec, who is,
Are we
Who is
ensuring
left
the number
out?
twos or?
Number
In
two.
Parks and Rec, it was mainly top management. It was basically the director, assistant director. I believe it included coordinators and below.
Okay, so that I guess that gets a little messy because I was hoping to create a product that would give everybody their number twos essentially included in this discussion, but they would get up to the 50th percentile.
Correct.
Okay.
So it would be an increase.
It
would be the
this
50th
looks like it's an
percentile.
increase across the board. It's just different percentages of it. And
Yeah. Okay. I just want to make sure that was covered. So they would.
But what I also heard in this is we actually don't have position information on all the positions. So I do think this gets us.
What I heard and what I believe is true is we have some information on all positions.
Yeah.
There are positions, we don't have 10 cities, and there are some that we never get 10 because they're not equivalent in another city is not there.
Yeah. So I like to say,
Is
I'm
that
still
accurate,
comfortable with
Brody?
this.
Yeah, I would say you have enough information to make a decision tonight. It can always be refined, but those refinements won't change. It will be very insignificant.
Okay, so is there any further discussion before I take the vote that was proposed?
Mayor, if you will, just have the resolution number stated, and then the resolution has a blank inside of it. So we just need the dollar amount from Steve's report. So if you will just actually restate adoption of the resolution and that dollar amount, and then we have all the other notes to make up.
Okay,
Want me to do that?
Yeah.
All right.
R2208 would be the,
I motion that we accept proposed resolution 2208, adjusting the Syracuse City budget for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022 to, can you give me the number, Steve?
761,000.
761,000. And with knowing that we will be looking at this over the budget cycle and finding a way to get everybody to where they need to be. But this at least gets everybody most of the way and some all the way.
I'll second that if we need to.
okay, motion and second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
nay?
Nay.
Aye. Sorry.
Wait, was that it? Was sorry.
Aye. Sorry, I was late on my aye.
For
Okay,
opposed.
So I am for it. Aye.
Okay, so that passes 3-2 with Bingham and Carver opposing. Okay,
I will note that I opposed it on the reference that I don't think we did enough for some of those. I think everybody should be at 60%.
okay,
I'd like to be on record as saying we needed to hit the 60th for everyone.
okay. So noted. We will now move to proposed ordinance 22-01.
Should we take a break? Would that be okay? At all? Just so you use the restroom? real fast.
Okay, I will declare us in recess for 5 minutes.
I don't even need that one.
All right, I thought we were going down the line.
No, no. When we go down the line, it's called roll call vote. So just FYI. Okay, well, I guess.
Well,
That last like 15 minutes there, I was,
Okay,
I was like ladder
okay, council, we need to get back in session and finish.
Where's my tape?
All right.
Well, there was a public hearing before you got here on this. Oh.
Thousand percent.
So, okay. I hope you heard me say that I was trying to be protective of us knowing all those facts ahead of time. But it is the council's prerogative to make a motion. And I don't get to vote. Where they're going to land. Well, you got more of a raise than I've gotten in 10 years, so.
Would you like to apply for us? We would hire you, I think. Like, we need employees big time.
I understand what you're saying, but the process that it is regulated to us is we have an open hearing, then we have discussion by council, and then a motion. And there is no. Yeah, but honestly, that's prescribed to us by law. We have, the hearing comes first. There's always a hearing on a money issue. If it's not a money issue, there's not a public hearing. That's a very good point. My obligation is when they make a motion, I have to call for a vote. Yeah, I know. I'm sorry for that. Well, I was trying to say that we have unknown factors that will come up in our budget. And that's what I have. Okay, I call us back into order. We are on item 6, proposed ordinance 2022-01, amending sections 6.4.03 and 6.4.07, enacting sections 11-15-030, prohibiting the use of engine brakes in the city limits. Now, in the interest of time, since we have been here for a while and we have already discussed this, I'm going to ask for expeditious.
I would like to talk about this for just a second. I did look back, and Jordan, you were correct. This was passed for an ordinance in 2018. It was started in 2017. July 8th of 2020, I brought this issue to Mr. Robert Whiteley. I'm not sure where he's at, but to readdress again as livestock agricultural issue because it was causing injury to livestock. And I'd like to remind everybody that there's a lot of folks in Syracuse that make their income off of livestock. And this new resolution doesn't reflect that in any way. And I think being an agricultural city, as well as loving our farmers, like we say, our city code should reflect that we consider this as a.
Okay, can we accept in the interim, there's the option. First of all, we have the option to table this and go back and rewrite it. But can we accept that the results are the same?
Yes.
Considering that this prohibits the use of them, period?
Yes.
Okay, so are you willing to go forward?
Yes, but.
Okay.
Adding.
That's good. Yeah. Added to the record. Thank you. So
I so move that we adopt this as written with an addition to agricultural and livestock on it.
Okay, so if we're going to make an addition, we have to figure that out.
Okay, so that's.
So that we'd have to table it for the additional language.
So it could be added through a text in the ordinance, or you could add it as a whereas. We've got the statement, the purpose language in all of our ordinances. You could always add an additional, give us some words of what you want to have in the ordinance. Then we can amend the ordinance with the whereases.
Here to the safety of livestock. It literally causes me to go crazy.
Okay,
so you could add
if you're accepting of it being clarified with a whereas statement, this affects the livestock, or whereas this.
Yeah, because we have a whereas statement in it now. It's in there. Yeah, just
okay.
I would, yeah, I think that would be.
All right.
So whereas
We'll put
Syracuse
that
is
in
a
the
farming
motion.
community and noises can have adverse effects on livestock throughout the community.
Okay,
Uh, uh, At that case, I'm willing to take that and
Thank you.
I'll second the motion with my whereas or something close to it.
is that an acceptable amendment?
It is, yes, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Any
you.
other discussion? I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes unanimously. Item number 7, proposed resolution 22 or R2207, authorizing Syracuse City Police Department to apply property in the police department's possession to public interest use and designating specific property for use of the property. Do we need much discussion on this? We do this every year where things that are unclaimed go to the children's, what is it again? Sorry. Children's Justice Center auction. And every year I just ask that we try to put that in the magazine so our citizens can participate as well and we'll be reminded. Any further discussion on this? Can I get a motion?
Motion to approve R2207.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Lisa. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 8, proposed ordinance 2022-2, application for zone change from R1 and A1 to general commercial for property located at approximately 3329 South, 2000 West.
This was the coffee shop, right?
This is, we heard this as an application for the Alpine Church. They want the rezone so that they can add a coffee shop next to their church.
We had a concern about the tax on it, and we did get the answer for that, that it would be a business that pays taxes to the city and stuff like that.
Any further stipulations or comments?
And this isn't an area that's already classified in the general plan as commercial.
Yes. So just out of curiosity, and this is just for my edification, historically, we've actually had the staff briefly give an overview for the people present.
Okay.
Can we do that? Just I know what it is, but not everyone here does. And I think it as a courtesy, we ought to at least show them what's going on and then so that they know what we're voting on.
Okay,
I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you, Noah.
You're welcome.
quickly as we're already there.
Understood, but
for the benefit of those in attendance,
thank you.
The property in question is general planned commercial. And the proposed use is a church, which is actually permitted in all zones, but in addition to the church, they want to do coffee shop, which is not. And so that's why they had to rezone it from a combination of A1 and R1 to the proposed zoning of general commercial, which would allow the coffee shop. We held a public hearing in planning commission. They're forwarding a recommendation for approval. Last time you guys asked me to research sales tax from a nonprofit. I called the tax commission at the state. They said, yes, they still have to get a business license. They still have to pay sales tax. So
There will be no unfair advantage.
there's no unfair advantage. Yes.
And it's a drive-through, right? Like, so it doesn't take up any extra parking, anything like that. It's just a.
That's what
Well, no, I know, I understand that, but.
Yeah.
that's what I hear. But the general process for a rezone does not include a detailed site plan. It's just the use at this time. Planning commission will see a site plan sometime in the future. So stay tuned for their agenda to see all the juicy details.
All right.
Okay.
I so move that we approve the proposed ordinance 2022-2.
Second.
Motion and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. This next item is public hearing. Proposed ordinance 2022-03, application for zone change from residential 1 to residential 3 for property located at approximately 2383 West, 2700 South. Would you show us a picture of this and give us a brief overview?
You bet. It might just take me 1 second to share my screen. If I could get my screen enabled. Go. Can't see it. There it is. Okay, so for the benefit of those in attendance, the proposed property is located about 2400 west, 2700 south, just north of the shops. The current zoning is R1 and the desired zoning is R3. The only reason they have to do this is because we have two controls on zoning. We have both minimum lot size and a maximum number of units per acre. They can meet the minimum lot size, no problem, in the R3, which is 8,000 square feet, or R1 even, 12,000 square feet. But they couldn't meet the maximum units per acre. So in my staff report, if you found that interesting, I did the math. So the only way they can make it work for two lots on 0.63 acres is to have the R3, which allows 4 units per acre. Planning Commission held public
Are they
hearing.
planning on putting a duplex or just a house right there?
Just a house.
Yeah, right by those duplex. That's.
Duplexes are not allowed in the R3 zone, even though there are duplexes right next
Yeah.
door. There was a question about the noticing. We did hold a public hearing at Planning Commission, but I think there's a problem with the sign. So we reposted the sign, we resent the postcards. This meeting is set as a public hearing in case there was anybody that didn't know what was going on.
Okay, so let's
Hope
take care of
everything's
that.
above board now.
I'm going to open this to public hearing. If anybody would like to bring up concerns on this issue. Seeing none, I will close public hearing. Discussion amongst council or make a motion.
I went by there and I think it would be a big improvement of that property to put a house, build a house on it and clean it up. But right now it could use it.
Mr. Mayor, I propose we accept ordinance 202203, moving the aforementioned address from R1 to R3.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 10.
Thank you, Council.
Proposed resolution R22-10, updating and amending the Syracuse City purchasing policy, making changes throughout. Brody.
Okay, so this is just an amendment to our policy from 2014. And this one actually has the red lines. I made sure green in this case.
Thank you. I noticed that. Green light.
And the only reason this isn't on the consent agenda is because there was one additional thing from our previous meeting. And that was there were changes in the noticing requirements under state law. And so we've updated those in the policy as well.
Was that just the newspaper change? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion?
This is gonna improve our ability to be competitive and get bids easier. I support it and I would move that we approve R2210.
Thank you.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so this motion passes unanimously. Item number 11, award design contract for Emergency Operations Center project. Brody, our city manager.
We received proposals for this. We had 2 responses. There was a review committee that reviewed the responses. The results of the review committee are actually in your folder. And the recommendation is to award the design contract to JRCA in the amount of $36,000.
Okay, any further discussion? Anybody willing to make a motion?
I move that we award the design contract for Emergency Operations Center to JRCA.
I second.
Seconded by Councilman Carver. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Authorization, no, item number 12, authorization to execute agreement with Utah Department of Transportation for reimbursement of costs for engineering and inspection services related to the West Davis Corridor project. That's Robert. Thank you. Our
UDA
Public Works Director.
Yeah. UDA recognizes the additional work that Syracuse City's staff is going to have with the construction of West Davis corridor. They have offered to cover some of those costs for inspection services and some engineering design. Engineering design was roughly 15,000, what was estimated, and then just slightly under 500,000 for inspection services. So this would be an agreement with UDOT that we would accept that money from them for reimbursements.
That shouldn't need
Does
discussion.
anybody have an objection to receiving money from UDOT?
Motion to approve the authorization of administration.
Second.
Third.
Motion seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Item number 13, consideration of contract award for inspection services for city infrastructure impacted by the West Davis corridor. I'm presuming again, Robert, our Public Works Director.
Yes, so this is just related to item number 12. Once we learned that UDOT was willing to offer us some money, we went out to RFP to consider companies who could help us with inspection services. On September 1st, 4 companies submitted bids. WCG, that's Wall Consultant Group, came out ahead based on their quality and experience. So we received a cost estimate from them of, it was a little higher than the 500,000, but we refined the scope to be sure that it fit within that 500,000 that UDOT was willing to offer. So we've got that before you. It's Wall Consultant Group for potentially awarding the RFP to them.
Any discussion? Anyone want to make a motion?
Move that we award Wall Consulting for this inspection services contract.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item 14, authorize administration to execute agreement with United States Bureau of Reclamation for utility crossings. Robert, our Public Works Director.
So the Layton Canal pipeline that we have that's located along Bluff Road serves as an irrigation feeder pipeline coming off the Weber River. Now, the United States Bureau of Reclamation owns that pipeline. They also own the land that it's located in. With the relocation, with the West Davis corridor, a portion of that pipeline needed to be relocated out of the way of the new highway. With a relocated pipeline, it also required new properties for the Bureau of Reclamation to own for the pipeline. So we do have existing utilities that cross that new pipeline, and we will have new relocated pipelines that will cross that property that the Bureau owns. So this is very standard. Anytime we have a roadway or a utility that crosses their property, we have to have a license agreement in place. So this would just situate all of the utilities and roadways that cross it, particularly, and I've included in the packet, the particular crossings are along 700 South where it crosses there, 3000 West by Trial Drive, Antelope Drive, are the 3 major crossings. There will be more. They have a blanket license agreement that's included in the packet, and as they come, this license agreement would just need to be signed for each of the crossings. So I'm asking for approval, the council's approval, so that the mayor would be able to sign these as they come along from the Bureau of Reclamation.
Great questions. Can I get a motion?
How does that affect is that in any way gonna irrigation? How is that gonna affect the water flow right there?
So this is are you talking where the Layton
Right
Canal crosses?
Yeah, right there along from Bluff to 3000 along Antelope. Is that going to affect that area at all?
Yeah, so that transmission line feeds all of the Layton Canal service area, the Layton Canal Company service area. There are some other companies that will cross
So will it
this.
redirect that water is what I'm asking.
It will not redirect it. So UDOT's contractor is required to, if they haven't done so already, in fact, all of the relocations were already done with the Layton Canal pipeline last year.
Okay.
They do have a few additional relocations to make this year, particularly around Antelope Drive. But that will affect the Clearfield pipeline and some of Layton Canal companies just at the point of connection to crossing about where the Arts Academy is.
It's going to effectively pull that runoff water from the Cook property.
What do you mean pull it?
They use a lot of our runoff water. I don't know if you guys know that. They've relied on it. They don't rely on it. They shouldn't rely on it. But a lot of our pond runoff water, the farmers that farm that Cook property land right there, that they lease it, is that going to affect them by taking water from them?
So they will still be able to get water from like where our Bluff Pond is now. They'll still be able to get, so they have to redirect a pipeline to continue that to the west, crossing through the interchange at Antelope. So they'll still get their water.
But what about our runoff water
From our pond?
From our ponds that
Yeah,
those farmers around there use?
that will change. Our pond will actually get relocated.
So
we
that's
won't-
going to effectively change it to where that Cook property right there no longer receives any of that that runoff water.
From our pond?
Yeah, from any of our outlet ponds that ends up dumping into that 3000 ditch.
Right,
Correct?
right.
We're just jumping from 3000 down to 2700.
Yes.
Sending it west. So we
Yes.
effectively that's the one property we're affecting with it, correct?
Yeah, just
Okay,
with.
that's all I
not-
need to know.
Yeah, okay,
Thank you.
okay.
All right, any further discussion?
I move we authorize administration to execute the agreement with the BOR for the utility crossings.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye, only because I'm not
That would be
familiar
a
enough
nay.
on the farmer side to agree to that.
Okay, so that passes 4-1 with a nay from Councilman Carver. All right, item 15, consideration of release of easement for utility and road crossings along the relocated Layton Canal property owned by the United States Bureau of Reclamation.
So this is just the reverse of what we were of item 14. So there are some easements and roadways where we no longer have roads or utilities in those easements where the Bureau's pipeline and property now cross. A lot of this impact is along the old immigrant trail where the old Steed property was, kind of between 700 South and 3000 West. And then another is around Trial Drive and Glen Eagles Drive, where that big bulb out in the street, it will no longer need to be a bulb out because those houses are no longer there. So those easements that are associated with that and utilities that were in those easements serving those properties are no longer necessary. So it's relinquishing those easements so that those aren't tied up on the property for the Bureau.
Okay.
That's all.
Any further discussion? Can I get a motion?
I move that we release the easements for utility and road crossings along the relocated Layton Canal pipeline.
Okay, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Seth. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Item 16, discussion and or action of proposed ordinance 2022-04, amending section 2-10-100 of the Syracuse City Code related to council votes conducted between a municipal election and the swearing in of new council members. Paul.
Can you tell when an attorney drafts the agenda item?
Yes.
We try to be very precise and wordy. So this will be the first time that we've got language. We had a concept before that we discussed at the work session. So now there's some language in front of you, and certainly there's no particular rush for this because we've got a year and a half before this could come up again. Essentially what we've got here is when there's a municipal election in which council members are subject to change. After the election and before swearing in, there would be a new threshold, which would be 4 votes in order to affect any city business. Now, we talked about let's reserve this for major issues or things, and it's really hard to line draw. And I think what we're just doing here is saying, if it's really not controversial, then it's going to have no problem getting 5 votes or 4 votes. So it's just kind of let the votes decide whether it's controversial or not. And then if there is a vote and you just don't get those 4 votes, then that item will be placed on the next regular business meeting after swearing in. So the next council would have a shot at that issue. It would not apply to certain decisions that are required by law to have, we've got deadlines. So for instance, we got the canvass, which definitely will happen every time there's a municipal election. That one still has a 3-vote threshold. There are other ones kind of scattered throughout the state code and city code. And then also if you've got, and in years past, we've had council members that ran unopposed. So there's no question who's going to be sitting in those seats the next year. So that means this rule wouldn't apply those years. And then after the certification, if it turns out that all the council members are keeping their seats, that would also just, the rule would go away in those situations. So that's kind of where draw some language up based on your discussion, but certainly nothing set in stone. If there are things you like or things that you think are missing, now is the time to make that change. We can, you can act on it tonight, you can reject it tonight, you can table it, give more direction, whatever you like.
Discussion.
I think this is the epitome of government bureaucracy in its worst form. We just tied the hands of staff, of elected officials, of anybody approaching us to have a decision made in their behalf. Once every 2 years, it will happen for 2 months. If this, then that, except for when, and on the blue moon that this occurs and there is a high tide, then we allow this, but we don't allow that. And then we have to bring it before everyone to see if it's important enough to vote on or if it's not important enough to vote on, and how many votes it takes and how many it doesn't. This has nothing to do with best practices. There is nobody that practices this, and this should be thrown out. That's my opinion.
Are there other opinions?
I actually disagree. I think what this does is this actually protects the citizens so that after they've voted, if the people that are in office have essentially been voted out, I think this allows a protection in place so that if it's not controversial, then it'll pass. But if what we're trying to avoid is a whole bunch of 3-2 votes after an election when the people have spoken, but it hasn't been implemented yet. This doesn't decrease your term in office. This allows everyone's voice to be heard, and it allows everyone to still have a vote. The original recommendation was to not allow any on the agenda, and I think that would have been overreach. But I think this strikes a good balance so that not only are the people who have voted people in get a say, but also allows business to proceed in an orderly fashion.
I disagree. I mean, what do you do in situations where the incumbent loses in a primary? Do we just say, okay, for those last 6 months, they're not allowed to vote or their vote doesn't count?
Tonight?
I mean, that's
If
ridiculous.
it were in between, what would we have done tonight if it were in that 2-month block?
Then it would be placed
still,
on the next.
guess what, guys? We still passed a 3-2 resolution tonight. It doesn't change.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality
That's
is.
what I'm saying. Yeah, we
this
would
is-
have made our employees tonight wait 2 more months.
No,
if we
just,
did this.
we asked to
Look at the reality of it. Yeah.
We can only have one talk at a
Sorry.
time for the record.
We asked to see which cities were doing this. We didn't, I mean, nothing came back to indicate that this is a practice that's done. And so, I mean, if that's different and we have evidence to say, pretty standard practice that you change voting procedures with
The
them
last
lame
2
duck
months of
policy.
every other
Yeah, I
year.
mean, that would be different, but I have yet to see that, so I would not support this.
Any other
After tonight, I feel like if this were to take place in an emergency situation in that block of time frame, we would tie our hands severely with this. At first, I thought a supermajority would be reasonable, but if something were like this, we're supposed to, that blue moon with the high tide, as I sit here with my little crystal next to my thing, it is what it is. Like that would literally tie our hands for a situation like this. And then we would have lost our employees if it were that time.
And I think if you're saying that this is for the following year's term or the following administration's term, their term doesn't begin until January. The previous term is until the end of it, which is the end of the year. And so to say, well, the people have spoken, no, they've spoken for the next term, not for that existing term. And I think that you have a chilling effect on people who want to do business in general with the city that makes everything so bureaucratic and so regulated and difficult to process. If I had something I needed to act on quickly and get a decision and they say, oh, I'm so sorry, we're regulated to the point of not being able to do city business every other year for 2 months.
You have to
That
get 3 votes
seems,
in a
and you
month.
have to, yeah. So I just think that it's unnecessary.
I see the point with in the original thing about pushing it through, the things that making sure nothing is super controversial is pushed through, but it's we're always going to have something controversial at some point.
I mean, the hotel was controversial, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, in the end,
And
but in the
there's a
end, a
reason-
referendum came forward and it didn't succeed by a long shot.
And there are 5 votes for a reason. Everybody does have a different perspective and a different voice. And so to say, well, everything should be unanimous, it just isn't. People see things differently. And that's why you say the majority rules and 3 is a majority.
We've not found any other cities that have, as examples, that have implemented this as
just rumored.
just rumored.
I'm okay with whatever you guys, I just want to make sure we presented all the different sides, but
Appreciate that.
you're not going to hurt my feelings. So
Okay, so.
I want to make a motion.
I move that we reject the proposed amendment. Let's see, what do I need to say anything? 2204, amending a section 210-100 of the Syracuse City Code related to council votes conducted between a municipal election and the swearing in of new council members.
Second.
Motion and seconded. Now, just to be clear, because there's a double negative here, you are, an aye vote is a vote to kill this ordinance. A nay vote does not. So all in favor,
Aye.
all opposed.
Nay.
I think, did you-
Nay.
Nay, okay, sorry. So that is 3-2, that ordinance fails. Proposed resolution, item 17, proposed resolution 22-09, designated and appointing certain appointed officers to Syracuse City. This happens every year with just 3 positions, or every 4 years. Is it every 4 years? Every time there's a mayoral election for 3 people, which includes appointing Brody, the treasurer, the police chief gets reappointed every 4 years, and the city recorder. Any further discussion on that? Any objections? If not, can I get a motion?
I move that we accept proposed resolution R2209, designating and appointing certain appointed officers as city recorder Cassie Brown, city treasurer Brody Bavero, and police chief Garrett Atkin.
Second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it appears to be unanimous. That concludes our business for this meeting. And at this point in time, I will entertain public comment if anyone would like to make a public comment. Seeing none, I will close public comment. At this time, we will go into mayor and council announcements. A reminder that these are for announcing upcoming events and reports on anything that has to do with the rest of the council being aware of your assignments. We'll start with Seth.
At this time, I do not have any. Thank you.
Okay, Lisa.
I've been listening into the legislative sessions for the Utah League of Cities and Towns, and there are quite a few bills that have to do with housing and mixed-use developments, and they are going to be there's going to be an increase in the affordable housing portion of this. So they're still working out a lot of details. Not everything's passed, but I'm following those closely. And I think, let's see, that's it for now. Thank you.
Jordan.
Nothing to add.
Jennifer.
What did you say?
You said nothing to add.
Oh, nothing to add.
Okay, Paul?
I don't have anything to add.
Okay, and I don't have anything additional at this point. There is discussion that we can move into closed session pursuant to section 52-4-205. And at this point, we will begin stating the purpose of these sessions according to the law. So I need a motion to go into closed session. This one will be for the purpose of discussing purchase, exchange, or lease of real property. That needs to be included in the motion.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I propose we adjourn into closed session to discuss the property. Sorry, I didn't memorize it all.
Property, yeah. That would be purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
Purchase, exchange, or lease of real property.
Do I have a second?
A second.
Motion and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will recess for 7 minutes and meet back in the conference room for closed session. That adjourns our public portion of the meeting.
Gosh, Dad.